Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, December 18th, 2025. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Miles Bryan, senior producer at Vox and reporter for Today Explain, will be with us to talk about the growing revolt against AI data centers. And later in the show, Dr. Khalid Medani will be with us to help understand the brutal conflict in Sudan. Also on the program, Trump addressed the nation last night with a galvanizing speech about how the faltering economy is not his fault. Like, literally opened this speech with that, blaming Biden. Thankfully, it wasn't him declaring war against Venezuela, which is what many people thought that address was going to be about. Maduro instructs his navy to escort ships carrying oil, defying Trump's demands for essentially piracy. Speaking of the oil, Trump's just saying it now. No more narco-terrorism, just we want the oil. That's what we're doing. The House narrowly rejects 2 war powers resolutions attempting to curb Trump's aggression towards Venezuela. Just 48 hours before the DOJ is mandated to release the Epstein files, FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino says, "I quit."
Will be missed.
He can't even get back into podcasting now.
Oh,
because,
he will.
But he will, but he can't say anything real.
Yeah.
So it'll be
just like he did before.
But he also
Right.
has the stupidest audience in the entire world.
I know, but it's just like he's basically an asset now.
Yeah.
Because everything he says, any real stuff is classified. The White House tells federal immigration offices to start denaturalizing people. Despite the Supreme Court birthright citizenship case still being ongoing, DHS fast-tracked a $1 billion contract to a Trump megadonor who is offering free private plane flights to deport migrants. And HHS cancels millions of dollars in grants to the American Academy of Pediatrics, studying infant deaths, identifying autism, and more, because they criticized RFK Jr.'s vaccine policies. Marjorie Taylor Greene's anti-trans bill, which would charge healthcare providers with felonies for providing gender-affirming care to minors, passes in the House. This is your right-wing populist, by the way. A new analysis of the 2024 election finds that $900 million in dark money was spent on both the Trump and Harris campaigns. Biden/Harris. The U.S. approves $11 billion in weapons sales to Taiwan. And lastly, Kathy Hochul signs a right-to-die bill that allows terminally ill New Yorkers to end their lives. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Hello, everybody. It's an Majority Report Thursday. Hello to Matt. Hello to Brian. Hello to our lovely audience who I like to suck up to on my days. Just building a popular resistance to Sam. That's what we're doing with the coup. Speaking of coups, that's actually a transition that could work there. That's what the United States is trying to do in Venezuela.
Can I read a quote from the New York Times, which
Yes,
I
you
don't normally
can.
do? Mr. Trump's announcement of a blockade caught senior officials at the Pentagon and at Southern Command in Florida by surprise. On Wednesday, they scrambled to figure out the U.S. military's role in the action, U.S. officials said.
I mean, the amount of incompetence might be the only thing that saves us.
There was at the height of Watergate, there was like a worry that Nixon would call on like a squadron or something like that to help hold power. But these sort of like erratic, and to be honest, Nixon did walk around and like talk with people, like drunk, and talking to people at the Lincoln Memorial. So like he was pretty. This isn't entirely unprecedented. It is that though. It's the same thing as like Nixon wandering around drunk, arguing about football with hippies. Yeah.
What we had an IMer ask is the Trump presidency more Nixonian or is it more like a Reagan presidency?
It's a synthesis.
I think it has the economics of Reagan and the celebrity power of it.
And Madman.
But the illegality of Nixon and the vindictiveness and the pettiness. But so last night, as I mentioned, Trump addressed the country, and there was a lot of speculation in the lead up to this address that this is going to be him declaring war on Venezuela, which, by the way, he does not have the power to do. Congress has the power to declare war.
What if I say they're terrorists and it's weapons of mass destruction?
Well, maybe he just declares it, like when Michael Scott declared bankruptcy. In all seriousness, though, no, that's supposed to be Congress's purview. But last night he ended up just like ranting and raving in this address, blaming Biden for the economy. Within the first 60 seconds, he's talking about how the Democrats want to give transgender to everybody, saying that Biden released people from insane asylums over and over and over again. It looked very weak and desperate because we see the numbers that are coming out about his approval rating, which is in the toilet, and especially on issues like the economy and healthcare, the kind of kitchen table stuff that could really, really sink the Republican Party coming up in the midterms.
I would just remind people when he says that I'm impotent about Biden's failing economy still after all these months, that Biden's economy was actually kind of roaring by, capitalist standards.
Right.
When Trump took office, and then he got in and in his inaugural address said this.
You got it?
There'll be a little disturbance, but we're okay with that. It won't be much.
Won't be much.
And also the farmers are going to have a fun time. And both those things turned out to be, understatements or lies.
He also touted the tariffs repeatedly in that speech, which, he can't back off of his policies no matter how disastrous. It's anathema to him. But, part of also what he was elected on was this notion that he was more anti-war than the Democrats, and the Democrats have no one but themselves to blame for that. Biden overseeing a genocide, Kamala Harris refusing to distance herself from that, just left the lane open for the easiest possible argument, just by default, for Trump to make that case. See, when I was in power, this wasn't happening. When they're in power, you have Ukraine, you have this. And so it was by default.
People mention Nixon. Nixon won in a similar way, saying LBJ has this Vietnam War going on. I have a secret plan to end it.
And you'll notice that many of the officials in the administration and the Republican lawmakers that go on television will consistently say that these attacks on these boats, these more than, I think, 24 at this point, instances of bombing boats in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific that have killed at least 99 people by this point. They will say that these were drug runners, that these were narco-terrorists, and you'll hear that from them in the press. The thing is that you're not hearing that from Donald Trump that much. You know what you're hearing from him? Kind of the truth.
Yeah, what was that?
Getting land, oil rights, whatever we had, they took it away because we had a president that maybe wasn't watching. But they're not going to do that. We want it back. They took our oil rights. We had a lot of oil there. As you know, they threw our companies out, and we want it back.
We want it back. Oh, so not. It's
and then he shuffles away like he doesn't even know where he's going.
Yeah, I mean, he may not. So he came out the other day and said that fentanyl, which is not trafficked through Venezuela, is a weapon of mass destruction, because he's using the Iraq War era rhetoric to justify his now kind of his new Monroe Doctrine. I mean, there was a speech that Pete Hegseth had the other day where he said that the Monroe Doctrine had never gone away and that we're reasserting it. The idea that the United States has colonial dominion over the Western Hemisphere, which, you know, was an 1800s policy that was meant to curb European colonialism in the region and assert U.S. dominance there. This is what the United States under Trump is saying is basically their foreign policy. And we don't know fully the extent of Venezuela's oil reserves, but we know that it's some of the largest in the world. And what he's talking about getting, you know, kicked out of Venezuela, we want their oil reserves back. It doesn't matter about the sovereignty of the people of Venezuela.
Or that Chevron is operating with an agreement that's sort of, you know,
right.
We're not going to acknowledge.
They don't acknowledge, but they want it all. That's the point.
What they want is to actually kick out China.
Exactly. That's it. Right. And so, I mean, there were some estimates that China, I think, is I wrote this down here. Chinese buyers account for around 80% of Venezuela's oil sales, which, to Matt's point, much of our foreign policy at this point, despite being offensive and, yes, genocidal, is defensive.
Yes.
In attempting to curb China's growing influence, given their power, their efficiency, their self-sufficiency, and using brute force and military might to do so, whether that be in the Middle East or whether that be in Venezuela. And now Trump is supposedly being really tough on China. It's not like he's saying, hey, China, don't purchase from Venezuela, and using the United States as leverage there, which would be like probably the smarter thing to do if he was actually interested in doing that. No, dumbass bully, bomb, makes me feel tough, Department of War, baby. It's childish and immensely dangerous.
Yep.
And so, you know, like since this is by Chavez, when he came to power in the late 90s, it's been an obsession of neocons. To this point, we've tried coups. We've tried saying our Western-aligned guy or lady in this instance is the true president of Venezuela. We've tried sanctions. We've participated in like
covert
ops attempting to assassinate their leaders, and now Trump is just basically like, no, we'll do it with the military. And it's really concerning that yesterday 2 separate resolutions in the House, war powers resolutions, attempting to kind of rein this in, failed. They failed very narrowly. You had a few Republicans defecting. Jim McGovern had one pertaining to Venezuela, where you had 3 Republicans join it: Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massie, and then Bacon. Yeah, which, you know, I guess you could expect. And then there was another one introduced by Gregory Meeks that also failed. But here is Representative Nadia Velasquez, who is retiring. She's a Democrat that's in her early 70s that's retiring and allowing her safe blue district to potentially go to someone in DSA. Love her for that. Long time progressive, who's in her career in the House also been very vocal about trying to curb the authorizations for the uses of military force that I've been harping on over and over again, because it's providing, this is the basis that the Trump administration is trying to use to wage this illegal and offensive war, using the authorizations for the military force that the 2 that passed, one after 9/11 in 2001, the other in 2002, used to justify that illegal invasion of Iraq, basically giving the executive branch all this broad authority to use wartime actions without the approval of Congress, but pertaining to 9/11, pertaining to Iraq. That's why it's so important to call out the language that they're using here about narco-terrorists and fentanyl being a weapon of mass destruction, because they're trying to fit their insane policy into this like broad legal justification. And I don't think they should be able to do that. Anyone with two brain cells to rub together should understand that. But that's the pretext that they're attempting to deploy. So here is Representative Velasquez speaking about what needs to be done here.
I rise today in support of this World Powers Resolution. 23 years ago, I stood on this same floor as Congress debated an authorization for the use of military force in Iraq. The Bush administration relied on bad intelligence and outright lies to march America into a disastrous foreign intervention that cost trillions of dollars, took thousands of American lives, and helped destabilize the region for a generation. Today, I fear we're watching history repeat itself. Once again, a far-right administration is using the same playbook. The justification this administration has provided to Congress and the American people is a joke. If this was about drugs, why seize an oil tanker and threaten an illegal naval blockade? If this was about drugs, why would the president pardon a drug trafficking former president of Honduras?
Also, yeah, we can keep going a little bit. Yeah.
This is not about drugs. This is about regime change and control of Venezuela's resources. Nicolas Maduro is a dictator, and you don't have to defend him to recognize a simple truth. Venezuela does not pose an imminent threat, and a war will do nothing to make America safer.
Boom. All right. Really appreciated her bringing that context and the fact that, you know, she's been in Congress for many decades and saw Iraq and stood in opposition to it. I just want to remind people of how Trump was talking about Iraq in 2016. Just to give people a sense of, like, 10 years ago where we were, how he'll lie and use any way to attack his political opposition in a manner that is populist, but like, or he crowd surfs. Like, that is part of what his political talent is. But it is on the opposition party that they've been unable to show this contradiction in any real meaningful way. This is how he talked to Jeb Bush in 2016, or I guess 2015, but in the 2016 race in the primary.
Obviously, the war in Iraq was a big, fat mistake, all right? Now, you can take it any way you want, and it took Jeb Bush, if you remember at the beginning of his announcement, when he announced for president, took him 5 days. He went back. It was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. Took him 5 days before his people told him what to say, and he ultimately said it was a mistake. The war in Iraq, we spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives. We don't even have it. Iran is taking over Iraq with the
We don't even have it. Well, there's
the mask slips.
Yeah, there's the consistency. But people get the point.
Just a quick point. When they say war for oil, it's not to make gas prices lower. It's so American capitalists like Exxon profit from that natural resource being depleted, and not a state like China. Same as Iraq and the same as Venezuela.
100%. I mean, the Biden administration, if it was about keeping oil prices down, like the Biden administration, just purely on a fact-based level, like kind of broke the back of OPEC during his administration and really built up U.S. oil reserves. Now, like, it's disastrous for the climate, but the neocons and the capitalists and the Republicans should like that. That's an example of doing what Trump is saying he wants to do effectively. But that's not
it's about
his
great power
wheelhouse.
conflict.
Yep. A word from some of our sponsors, folks. You know, at the end of the year, you got Christmas parties, you've got holiday dinners, you've got late night wrapping with maybe a glass of eggnog or a glass of wine. It is the season for celebration. But just don't forget Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink. Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here is how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's a buildup of this byproduct, not dehydration, that is to blame for rough nights after drinking. Pre-alcohol provides an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you will feel your best tomorrow. This is when we have our little nights here, later nights covering debates, covering elections. We got the Z-Biotics on tap, folks, and it allows us to come in at our normal schedule, even though we're broadcasting sometimes till like midnight, and we are drinking responsibly, but it allows us to come in the next day and make sure that we have a good show for everybody. You notice a difference. Even after a night out, I can confidently plan on coming into the show, even doing a little bit of working out because of Z-Biotics. Make the most of every toast this holiday season. Just don't forget to bring pre-alcohol along for the ride. Go to zbiotics.com/majority to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use code majority at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantee, so if you are unsatisfied for any reason, they will refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/majority and use the code at majority at checkout for 15% off. We will put a link down below in the episode descriptions and at majority.fm. Another sponsor of the show today, Delete Me. Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everyone vulnerable. This is a sponsor that I can confidently get behind. I used Delete Me before they were even the sponsor of this show. When I started in this industry, I was asking my colleagues, like, what do you recommend to make sure that my private information is safe, that my family and friends are safe? Because sometimes if you're talking politics on the internet, some people don't like it. Try to send you emails, try all that kind of stuff. And Delete Me was the recommendation that I heard across the board. And I've been using it ever since for many, many years. Data brokers make a profit off your data. Your data is a commodity. Anyone on the web can buy your private details. That can lead to identity theft, phishing attempts, harassment, and more. But you can protect your privacy with Delete Me. These data brokers, they get your name, your contact info, social security number, home address, even information about your family members, and then they can compile it and sell it online. The New York Times Wirecutter has named Delete Me their top pick for data removal services. Delete Me knows your privacy is worth protecting. Sign up and provide Delete Me with exactly what information you want deleted, and their experts take it from there. Delete Me sends you regular personalized privacy reports showing what info they found, where they found it, and what they removed. Delete Me is not just a one-time service. Delete Me is always working for you, constantly monitoring and removing the personal information that you don't want on the internet. It's catching it. And those reports are very helpful because you know it's still working. Thanks to Delete Me for sponsoring the Majority Report. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. Now with a special discount for our listeners, get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/majority and use promo code majority at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/majority and enter code majority at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/majority, code majority, link down below in the video and episode descriptions and at majority.fm. And lastly, ever walk into a store and have no idea what wine to get? Yeah, that's me too. I'm also, like, you want to impress people, say you're bringing a bottle of wine to like a party or something like that. You want to get something that people like. And then sometimes you're just like, all right, maybe I'll buy a little pricier one than normal because that's got to be better, right? Well, that's just kind of winging it, basically. You're wasting time. You don't know what you're doing. But nothing says holiday season like a roaring fire, a cozy sweater, and a full glass of wine. This podcast is sponsored by Naked Wines. Naked Wines is a wine club that directly connects you with the world's best independent winemakers so you can get world-class wine delivered straight to your door. Use our code MAJORITY for the code and password at nakedwines.com and get $100 off your first order. That's 6 bottles for just $39.99, which is incredible. I got this Syrah that I think Sam also really, really enjoyed, that I got from Naked Wines. That was, I think, in my last order. I also got, I'm very picky about my whites, but they sent me a white, I think it was a Sancerre, that I really enjoyed. Sometimes I'm white wines. I'm picky about my white wines. You idiots. But I mean, sometimes the whites too can be annoying.
Compact just wrote a piece about that.
But especially around holiday time, I like the reds. I like the reds in the winter. And Naked Wines has given me some great options. I'm really looking forward to my next batch. And how do they do it? Naked brings you amazing wines straight from the winery at up to 60% less than what you would pay in store. By cutting out extra costs like middleman markups, winemakers can pass those savings on to you without skimping on quality. We have talked about middlemen and how much they are inflating the prices of everything in our lives. Naked Wines does not have that problem. Naked Wines has been around for over 15 years and backs over 90 independent winemakers around the world to make the wine that you love to drink. Now is the time to join the Naked Wines community. Head to nakedwines.com/majority, click enter voucher, and put in my code majority for both the code and password for $100 off your first order. That's 6 bottles for only $39.99 with shipping included. That's $100 off your first 6 bottles at nakedwines.com/majority and use the code and password majority for 6 bottles of wine for $39.99. Link down below in the episode and video descriptions and at majority.fm. Again, that's to get 6 bottles of wine for $39.99. Head to nakedwines.com/majority and use code majority for both the code and password. Quick break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Miles Bryan. We are back, and we are joined now by Miles Bryan, senior producer and reporter for Today Explained, Vox's daily news podcast. Miles, we have Brian over there. Miles.
It's okay. It happens to me all the time.
Miles, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Let's talk about this kind of backlash to these billions of dollars of AI data center projects that are happening around the country, seemingly kind of unabated until fairly recently. Your piece opens speaking a little bit about a Pennsylvania kind of community coming together and trying to push back against these data centers. Tell us a little bit about that story in particular.
Yeah. So as you said, there's billions, hundreds of billions of data centers in the works or planned for the United States. So it's not like very hard to find an example of where one of these is coming. It's also not hard to find an example of where people are mad about it. But I looked at a proposed data center project in suburban Philly, a town called Conshohocken. I live in Philly, so it was convenient for me to get to and cover. But the reason it really stood out to me is that the plan for this data center was to be in an old steel mill. It was a steel mill that had been operating since the 1830s north of Philly. It really represented in kind of a literary sense and in an actual sense, the old industrial economy that powered these places, that created middle-class jobs, that helped build these communities, yada, yada, yada. And the steel mill had been limping along since the 70s and ended up actually closing only last summer. So it's pretty recent. And it's this huge, industrial building on the side of the river. And when a developer went to the town council wanting to replace it with a data center, it felt very listening to him talk at the meeting, it felt very like, oh, this is just sort of the story of America's economic transition. We're losing the steel mills, we're getting the data centers,
Yay.
this is, yeah. And I do want to actually start with it is a good pitch if you're a council member of normal town USA. This guy's hey, we're going to put in this data center. It is going to pay tens of millions of dollars in taxes. You know what it's not going to do? It's not going to put any kids in the school district. It's not going to put more cars on the road. It's not going to require water and sewer hookup. It's kind of like a money machine. You just accept the box. You get the box, and in return, you get a lot of tax revenue. So that's the pitch. It's interesting to me because it's being made all over the country to all sorts of communities. But the pushback in this community was really intense. All sorts of people rallied against it. I interviewed a couple of them, just these young women who had never been political organizers, who got super into this, learned all about data centers and all these things that concern them. And that data center project's now on hold, but it just sort of keyed me into this whole world of data center pushback, which is not something that's sort of tracking neatly on political lines, but it's happening everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, so tell us a little bit about the nature of that pushback. There was an article this morning in The Verge. Just you see these analyses that come out that it's seems like every day about just the amount of pollution this is causing. The opening paragraph in this article is AI created as much carbon pollution this year as New York City and guzzled up as much H2O as people consume globally in water bottles, according to new estimates. Just to give people a sense of how much this has scaled up. Is that
incredible stuff?
Is that where? Incredible, not in the positive sense. Is that the center of a lot of the pushback that you reported on?
Yeah, I would say I noticed two things. One, maybe the biggest one is electricity bills, right? If you live in the Northeast, you're probably part of the PJM regional electric grid. There's been tons of data centers that have come online here, especially in Northern Virginia in the last 5 or 6 years. And they've been driving up cost of electricity because they gobble up a huge amount of electricity. The pollution thing is interesting because a lot of data center projects now are including basically mini power plants. This one wanted to have its own natural gas power plant system that would help reduce what it's pulling from the grid, but would mean that you have a natural gas burning plant right next to your house if you live next to it. So
Jesus.
That's not appealing. And then, I think one thing I want to be fair about is I do think a lot of this opposition comes from a generalized NIMBY sense that probably would be true for other uses too, right? You have a house and it's near a lot and they're going to put this giant glowing, humming data center near you. You're probably not thinking oh, this is going to be great for my school district over the next decade. You're I just don't want the box. Right. And that's a bipartisan force in American politics.
Yeah, absolutely. And it connects, I think, and perhaps in a way that's the silver lining, the economics of daily life with the environment. I mean, that's in many ways what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and others were so prescient about with the Green New Deal. And how we can make that connection, I think, politically is by emphasizing this issue in particular.
Yeah. And it also I know this comes up on the show, but it's hard to say exactly what the benefits of all of this AI infrastructure building are going to be to normal people, or that's what I picked up in my reporting, talking to people. They might have some abstract sense that it's supposed to sort of save the world, but what's it doing for you now? Okay, you can make erotica on ChatGPT or generate a video with a Disney character, but is it making your life better in a tangible way? I don't know. And, like what is tangible in that case? It's the big glowing box in your neighborhood. So.
Right. And the electricity bills that you're talking about, you wrote about how in New Jersey, this was really important in the governor's race. And you saw, I think, you saw Cheryl influenced by Zoran in many ways, like influenced by the affordability argument. She said in her victory speech, I'm going to declare a state of emergency about affordability. Yeah. And electricity was a part of that, right? I mean, talk a little bit about how her campaign embraced this, and it seems like it's a roadmap across the country for Democrats.
Super interesting. So Mikey Sherrill, who I also covered for the show, she was really smart politically, and she got ahead of this brewing issue, this kind of populist issue in New Jersey, which is their rates have gone up a lot. And, some of that's attributable to data centers, some of it to other things. It's not always super easy to draw the one-to-one connection, just to be fair. But yeah, she sort of made that a centerpiece of her campaign, trying to make sure that people's rates don't continue to go up. And, for my reporting, I talked to a couple of people who actually ran on data centers as having a negative impact on their voters' quality of life and on their electric bills. I talked to one guy who ran for a state Senate or a state representative seat in Virginia near Data Center Alley, where there's just a ton of these. And he was a Democrat, and he won a seat that had been a Trump 2024 seat. He flipped it 100% by running on data center opposition. And he told me, I don't think I would have won without bringing this up in all of my conversations. This is the thing that comes up over and over again. And I think this is so interesting because, it just doesn't really map out onto our left-right politics. And it doesn't seem to come up with the very big players that often. Here in Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, a lot of signs are pointing towards him running for president in 2028. He loves data centers. He's super pro data centers. Same with the Republican senator here, McCormick. Same with, obviously President Trump, very into data centers. I saw Bernie Sanders proposed a moratorium on them, I think today, it's in the last day or two. So maybe that's the first inkling of it.
Well, Miles, I'm going to push back on you slightly. There's a huge difference between Josh Shapiro and a guy like Bernie. It's people that are basically a little bit more corporately captured, right? Yeah.
No, I don't disagree with you. I mean, Bernie Sanders is that maybe we're seeing it now. Right. But then, you have this guy, James Fishback, down in Florida, who's sort of running a far-right campaign to beat Byron Reynolds to take the governor's office to replace Ron DeSantis. He put out his launch video, and big plank of it was, I'm against data centers, or I'll be against data centers if they're taking too much of our water or electricity. Yeah. It's a populist attack line, across our two parties.
Absolutely. Is that the guy that said the train that wants the trains, the guy who invoked Mussolini?
Yeah, a little bit of well. That's something that could be drawn from that video. Yes.
Yes, it feels implied, but the power usage here. Can you talk a little bit about why you see how really people's electricity usage has flatlined residentially, but the commercial use is, and I think industrial would be the other category, or I'm not exactly sure, but it's clearly being driven by companies, corporations, these data centers that are driving up prices, and our grid just doesn't have the capacity. There are companies I think that are working on greener technology for this technology and how you can electrify the grid in a way that's not using fossil fuels and coal and stuff like that. But because there's this race to build these AI data centers to get ahead of regulation, it seems like, and the political backlash that you're talking about, they're using the dirtiest energy sources possible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of natural gas independent hookups for data centers where they can say, hey, we're not pulling from the grid, but we are, burning gas. In Pennsylvania, I think Microsoft is looking to reopen 3 Mile Island, the nuclear power station that closed that closed actually just recently and had that disaster in the 1970s to try to generate nuclear power. But I think you're right, Emma. You're pointing to the fact that there's just this huge race and demand for all this compute. And this idea that, like, you know, if we don't have a million servers humming, a million more than China, they're going to beat us to some, you know, the endpoint of this sort of competition. And we can't really generate enough electricity fast enough to meet that demand. So in the interim, like, normal people will suffer because they can't afford as much. Like, the electricity is sold to the highest bidder.
And China, yeah, spoiler alert, is going to beat us on this anyway, and probably already has. You cited this analysis from Data Center Watch in your piece, where they looked at projects across the country and found that in the second quarter of this year, 20 data center projects worth almost $100 billion were either canceled or delayed. And so that's kind of speaking to the broader backlash that it's not just centered in a few communities, it's growing. What did you find in looking at that analysis?
I mean, it really just puts numbers to something that became clear to me when I was poking around. I think you could just Google data center pushback, like, wherever you are in the country, and you're just going to get like a flood of local, county or regional level stories about stuff that's happening that maybe you hadn't even noticed. Like, I'm here in Pennsylvania, I searched it, and it's in the Philly region, but also in like deep red Western PA, sort of Trump country outside of Pittsburgh. I go to my wife's parents' house in near Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I look, and there's like, 10 of these. Just anywhere, I think over the last couple of months, there's so many data centers under construction across the United States, and increasingly, almost any of those projects are starting to get, anxious residents pushing back for a bunch of reasons. And I think most of the time they're not successful, but increasingly they are.
Yeah. So, lesson for everybody: if you are, just Google where you are, Google your community, look it up, try to find if there is, a data center that project in the works, and you can voice opposition to that. Would you recommend that site Data Center Watch that you cited? I feel like that could be a good resource for people.
Well, okay, so this is interesting. Data Center Watch is a research project that's frequently cited, including by me, as like a pretty comprehensive list of pushbacks on data center construction. It's not a nonprofit or anything. I saw some other news outlets get dinged for accidentally thinking it was like a advocacy group. It is a research project of an AI company that I think called 10A Labs. I talked to the guy who did the research. He said they're independent, but it's numbers, I believe, published, as a service for people in the industry seeking to get data centers built, or at least who tend to support data center construction. So, that's definitely a place to look. But I think, it's worth consulting a number of other groups. And I should be clear, I'm a reporter. I'm not going to sort of offer an opinion on whether to support data centers or not. I'm just, it's worth.
No, that's me. I'll do that advocacy. Yeah. Miles Bryan, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Really appreciate your time. Where can people find your work?
Thank you so much for having me. Please listen to Today Explained. We're a daily news show. We're very rigorous, but we're also like fun and not stiff. You'll hear me there.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, quick break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Dr. Khalid Medani, Sudanese scholar, associate professor of political science and Islamic studies, and director of the Institute of Islamic Studies at McGill University, here to talk about Sudan. We are back, and we are joined now by Dr. Khalid Medani, a Sudanese scholar and associate professor of political science and Islamic studies, and director of the Institute of Islamic Studies at McGill University. Dr. Medani, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I saw you were on Democracy Now! This morning. Gosh, they're bookers. They know what they're doing, and
I know. And I'm wearing the same jacket too, so I apologize.
Well, I'm irrationally angry at them for scooping you first, but they're doing great work over there. Now, I obviously what we're about to talk about is horrifying. I want to back up for a bit because we've seen these updates in Sudan, the Yale analysis of satellite imagery showing thousands and thousands of bodies basically being disposed of. But before we get to that more current update, let's go back to the beginning, or maybe not the beginning, but people will talk about spring of 2023 is when this civil war formally started. But in reading some of your writing, it might be more helpful for us to back up to say 2011, 2018, etc.
Sure. I mean, I usually quickly begin with 1989. And the reason for that is that's really when the authoritarian state was established in Sudan following a military coup that overthrew a democratically elected government. That period between 1989 and 2018 was very formative. It was the period where the autocratic state was built. And there were a couple of very important things that are related to the war that I always like to highlight. Number one, there was a complete purging and dismissal of hundreds of thousands of people from the public service and bureaucracy. And they were replaced by Islamist stalwarts, members of the very powerful Islamist movement in Sudan. The Islamist movement in Sudan is the only movement in the Middle East region, in any Sunni Muslim majority country that took over power. And that's something that is a dubious distinction in the Arab and Middle East region. So that's really important to highlight that. Through the course of these decades, over 30 decades of rule, you had not only the dismissal of the bureaucracy, but also the complete monopoly of the domestic economy. That was the second pillar. And the third pillar, directly related to the war, that I think people should know, is that it was also a period of what we call coup-proofing. That is establishing paramilitary militias that would do two things. Very importantly. One of them was to put down the insurgency in Darfur in the early 2000s that many people in the United States and elsewhere know, that genocide of the early 2000s. That was extremely important. So they used the Janjaweed militia at the time as proxy to enact earth-scorched policies. That was the beginning of the ethnic cleansing in Darfur. Over 200,000 civilians dead, over 2 million displaced. That becomes important. But another element that was key with respect to the paramilitary militia, the Janjaweed, that was later transformed and mutated into the Rapid Support Forces, that is the second most important protagonist in this war, the militias right now that are, wreaking havoc and devastation in Darfur, was to also use them to put down the dissent of civil society, particularly pro-democracy movement. So they had two very important kind of functions. One is to put down the insurgency in Darfur that led to that genocide in the early 2000s. And another, very importantly, is that they were used to stamp down, public protest, intifadas that are very, very important and became very important following the uprisings in Tunisia and Egypt that changed the entire political landscape of the Middle East and North Africa region. I mentioned that as a kind of prelude to saying that this is essentially the war that began in April of 2023 is essentially a war against civilians. It's a kind of a long way of trying to explain to your listeners and viewers why these two factions are basically butchering the population, the civilian innocent population. And the reason they're both doing that is both of them are interested in making sure that the very important democratic revolution that began in 2018 that toppled the military regime would not restart. And so both of them have one thing in common, and that is that they fear any kind of potential of a popular uprising among Sudanese civilians. And that becomes a really important aspect of this war. Why is that important? Is because I'm always asked, and we are asked, who's the good guy and who's the bad guy? This war is very different from other conflicts in the sense that both protagonists are at fault. Both protagonists are, enacting a huge kind of devastation against the civilian population. So you referenced the Yale Research Laboratory, which is phenomenal and has documented this devastation, ethnic cleansing, displacement, and savagery in Darfur, and particularly now in North Darfur. But they also had a very important report that came out in October, where they documented in detail what the Sudan Armed Forces has done between October 2024 and January 2025. And that is enact the same kind of ethnic targeting of innocent civilians in the central part of the country when they retook it from the Rapid Support Forces. So long story short, in summary, both of them have a vested interest in maintaining their political and economic fortunes that they built over 30 years, because they were partners against the Sudanese people for all this time. But also, both of them are also really perpetuating a wide range of mass killings, displacement, sexual violence, all of the litany of human rights violations that the Yale Laboratory has documented through their satellite imagery, but also so many human rights organizations, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch. So I hope I didn't go on too long, but I just wanted to set up the context for why the war is so savage against the civilians.
It's quite helpful, and when you're asked who's the good guys and who are the bad guys, perhaps it's more useful to say who is aligned with whom. You have the United Arab Emirates being a major player here in its backing of the Rapid Support Forces, but maybe even if we could go back to 1989 and how that Islamic insurgency came to be, and what role foreign powers played in that potentially, because I see this described as a proxy war now, but I wonder how long the proxy goes back.
Yeah, it's a really very important. Sudan came to prominence in the region and globally in the 1990s. That it became, the reason I mentioned it was the first and only Islamist movement to actually capture state power, is that it became throughout the mid 1990s the hub of Islamist movements. Every Islamist movement, from the Egyptian one, Tunisian one, the Hamas, all of them really kind of centered their work and operations because they were clandestine organizations in Khartoum, in Sudan. They were invited because following the coup, the Islamist coup, which was very, very important. So that becomes important. As you may know, famously, Osama bin Laden, of course, was hosted in Sudan during that period. And that, of course, led to the imposition of over 2 decades of sanctions on the part of the United States against Sudan, and the European Union also. So you had a very strong Islamist movement that begins very early on in the 1940s, but captures state power. Why? Essentially because they did something that no Islamist movement in the Arab region was able to do, although they tried. And that is, by the mid-19 or early 1980s, they infiltrated the armed forces. It really is the only Arab-speaking country where the Islamist movement successfully recruited mid-ranking military officers and then plotted through a variety of different ways,
as opposed to, sorry, just to draw that distinction for people, being an outside group militia. This is an integration into the formal Sudanese military.
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. And if you add to that, then the creation of the Janjaweed by the state, the military regime of Umar Bashir at the time did 2 things. One of them, of course, was to incorporate the Islamist movement as the most important constituency, not only in the army, but a wide range of security services. But they also established these militias, the Janjaweed. And then in 2013, they're the ones, the central government, Bashir regime, actually also financed and established the Rapid Support Forces promoting Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo. So it's this kind of partnership that ended in divorce, in a violent divorce later on. In 2017, the military regime in Sudan actually legalized constitutionally the Rapid Support Forces as part and parcel of the army. So one thing that people don't always perhaps understand is that it's basically a Frankenstein monster created by the Sudan Armed Forces that now has led to this rivalry, which is really important. We can speak about why that rivalry came about and why that violent divorce emerged.
Please do, but I just want to make sure that I'm fully understanding. So the formal Sudanese armed forces integrated the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, which are backed by the UAE that I just mentioned, into the formal military structure, and now that they empowered them, and these are the two factions that are waging this brutal war against civilians at this current moment.
Absolutely. And let me talk about the UAE just 1 second. The UAE comes in much earlier than now. It comes in at the invitation, essentially, of the former regime as early as 2014. And I think your listeners and viewers may want to be interested to know that both the Sudan Armed Forces and the militia, the Rapid Support Forces, cooperated with the UAE at the time and Saudi Arabia to send mercenaries to Yemen to fight alongside the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. And so while the UAE absolutely supports, and there's clear evidence, the Rapid Support Forces, not only logistically, but through really the importation of smuggled gold worth $2 billion a year in the gold mines controlled by the Rapid Support Forces, their history really in Sudan dates much earlier. They also played a very formative role, and I think it's very important to emphasize both Saudi Arabia and UAE and Egypt in working against the pro-democracy revolution and supporting the military coup of October 2021 that overthrew this very fragile democratic experiment in Sudan. So they're very much opposed to a democratic transition in Sudan because it threatens the neighboring countries, and also they are very interested in having a so-called reliable proxy in Sudan. Each one now, of course, has different proxy in order to safeguard their strategic and financial interests and investments. And finally, I think it's really important to emphasize to everyone that what we're seeing in Sudan now is similar to Yemen, a huge competition between Saudi Arabia and UAE over the Red Sea region. And that is the larger regional story. And the people in the midst of that story are the innocent civilians in Yemen, but of course in Sudan as well.
So you're saying a competition between the UAE and Saudi Arabia over that control?
Absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Can you expand on that? Because Iran is, I would say, the power that was more emphasized in my view in the Yemen. The forced famine, the horrific blockade. I guess that's distinct. We're talking 2015. That's probably maybe where I'm tripping myself up here. Talk about a little bit about Iran and their role then as well.
Sure. Well, Iran has, since basically the failure of Saudi Arabia in particular to really win the war in Yemen, as you probably know, there's been a rapprochement with respect to Saudi Arabia and Iran. That's really important to keep in mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
Partially brokered by China.
Absolutely.
Right, which is very threatening to the United States, or should be.
Absolutely. Yeah. But since Saudi Arabia increasingly does not see the United States as powerful enough or in necessarily a viable partner, so to speak, in the region, they've tried very hard to have this independent policy with respect to Iran. And that has to do with, people forget that the Houthis are in North Yemen. They're on the border of Saudi Arabia right now. There is this impending conflict between the proxies of Saudi Arabia and those of the UAE in Yemen that just happened yesterday. I really would encourage people to look at how important that is. So Iran has had this kind of rapprochement. What is less known and talked about is the kind of conflict or competition between the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. On the one side, the Saudi Arabian vision is to have stability and unity of these countries, Sudan and Yemen, because of the Red Sea interest. And they have, Crown Prince bin Salman, as you know. I think people really underestimate his investment in the Red Sea area worth trillions of dollars, this kind of Saudi Arabian Vision 2030 that is so important to him. That's why he went to Trump and asked him to solve the Sudan problem, as one important example. On the other hand, the UAE has a very different vision. For them, it is to support proxies, to have control over the ports and resources, and that for them does not require stability and unity of these countries, but rather supporting financially and logistically, whether it's the Southern Transitional Council in Yemen, now in the eastern part of or western part provinces of Yemen, and across the Red Sea coast of Yemen, or of course the Rapid Support Forces bordering Libya in Darfur. So I hope that's not too complicated, but it's really important to understand that a lot of what's happening in what we call these regional hegemons have emerged in a way that has kind of marked the decline of U.S. influence necessarily. I always say that the U.S. essentially subcontracts its policy with respect to Sudan and the Horn of Africa to the real powers in the region, direct powers, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates.
Well, I mean, is that in part due to the fact that the oil reserves are not necessarily as deep as initially thought? I mean, I know that there was the secession of South Sudan, where much of the oil was located, and that was a big part of the economic, uprising and fury from the population, if I'm not mistaken, or if you could clarify that for me, that would be great.
Sure. The regime in Sudan basically got gravely weakened in 2011 because they lost their most important source of revenue. At that time, over 70% of the revenue was coming from the production and export of oil that was basically funneled into two ways, into the military and security establishment, and frankly also as a form of, carrots, doled out to different populations or constituencies in Sudan. Once South Sudan seceded in 2011, basically all of that oil and its revenue evaporated. And at that point, the financial kind of basis of the state in Sudan, the autocratic state, essentially fell apart. It gave way to this grand revolution, or very important revolution, although it was really activists had been working on that kind of popular uprising for decades. But certainly the weakness of the state because of the loss of oil opened up this possibility of a popular uprising that overthrew the regime. Following that, beginning in 2012, another commodity comes into play that becomes central to the conflict, and that is gold. Sudan is the third largest exporter of gold in Africa, the 12th largest in the world. If you look at gold prices because of global economic insecurity, you can quickly understand why there's this kind of convergence over extraction of gold and why that is so important. So really, this is a war about maintaining power, but between the two warring factions, if you look very closely, even at what's happening in Darfur, where there's gold and uranium and oil deposits, or you look to different parts of the country, you will find that it is essentially, and has been for decades, a war around resources in one of Africa's and the Middle East really the richest countries. And that's what we call the resource curse as well. So it's very important to highlight, both the domestic factors associated with the conflict, but the proxies and what their interest in Sudan is. It's not only in strategic interest in the Red Sea region, but also people should not underestimate the importance of these resources for United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. Both countries are really engaged in what we call, of course, energy transition that is less dependence on oil, and both the countries are really looking to the longer term future, where it won't be oil, but other forms of resources, including agricultural resources that become essential to their sustainability.
I mean, then you can see how they're trying to spread their influence into things like entertainment and sports here in the United States. That's a very, very, obvious attempt to wean themselves off of just being, a petrostate in that way. Can you talk a little bit about Egypt and their role in this? Because they border Sudan, I believe. And then, we also, of course, have the genocide ongoing in Gaza. Egypt borders the Gaza Strip. Like, the proximity is something I'd love for you to flesh out here, because as you say, like, it's maybe not direct U.S. involvement in the same way that we would in other conflicts in the Middle East, but obviously the interests of our proxies are important here as well.
Absolutely. There are three very important actors: Saudi Arabia, the UAE, obviously the United States. They have formed a quad. We can discuss that in terms, I'm sure Trump has been speaking about it, and so has his in-law, Mossad Boulos. But Egypt is historically the most important. For a number of reasons. One of them, of course, it shares the border with Sudan, and any kind of democratic push and success of a transition to a civilian democracy is directly threatening to the regime in Sisi. We can't forget, of course, the kind of popular revolution of 2011 in Egypt. That's number one. So from the Egyptian perspective, supporting or having a reliable partner is really key. And that partner has always been historically the military in Sudan. That is something that's very important. But why also is Sudan so important to Egypt? And for people interested in history, the Nile waters run through Sudan, Egypt, and Ethiopia. And of course, over the past decade, the Ethiopian government has established something that is existentially threatening to Egypt, and that is the Renaissance Dam, which Egypt believes will cut off its lifeblood, its water. And so the rivalry historically and even currently between Egypt and Ethiopia makes Sudan even more important to Egypt, and their alliance with the military important, because they need that partnership, that alliance, in order to really compete, or rather, contest this Renaissance Dam that Ethiopia has built.
Quick interjection. Does that increase Egypt's perhaps reliance on the United States and Israel, or incentivizing it to having a closer relationship with that because Ethiopia's dominance in the Red Sea is increasing?
Well, it definitely makes it incentivizes them to have a closer relationship with the United States.
Yeah.
The closer relationship with Israel is the complicated one, because there are domestic issues that people underestimate. Of course, no country in the region is all powerful, but to normalize relationship, let's say with Israel, that, for example, Bahrain and the UAE have done, is not, it's too overly politically risky on the part of Egypt, although there has been great pressure recently, very recently, to push that along. So there are domestic concerns because of the border, of course, with Gaza. And the one thing Egypt doesn't want to do is to get into that hot water. But certainly there's a friendlier relationship between Israel and Ethiopia, which I think is very, very important to highlight.
Right. I'm looking at a map here, and my spatial reasoning is not my strong suit. I did not even realize the size of Sudan's basically, shoreline with the Red Sea. It gives, I think, a lot of people, it gives a lot of context about why this is so strategically important in that way. I guess let's turn then to more recent events. Maybe we can go then to 2023, how this horrific violence began, and where we are today.
Sure. The war began because of the consistent stubbornness on the part of pro-democracy activists. I'm not saying this kind of to romanticize the popular uprising, but just to be very clear, what happened is that there was a competition between both the Sudan Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces. That kind of alliance and partnership over 2 decades, political, military, and economic, fell apart because the Sudanese civil society continued to protest, to insist on a transition to civilian rule. In the context of that, the international community, the African Union, the United States, and even the Arab countries oversaw something called the Framework Agreement, essentially talks to renew a transition to civilian democracy. There were 2 contentious issues in that agreement. One of them was to merge the militia into the Sudan Armed Forces, security sector reform. That, of course, directly threatened the Rapid Support Forces that over 2 decades had built a huge financial empire. You can see them using that money to devastate Darfur and the entire country, with the aid, of course, of the UAE in part. But the other issue that is less discussed is that the Sudanese kind of pro-democracy activists and civilian politicians had insisted on dismantling the financial assets that were amassed by the former regime. It was something that has never been attempted in the region, in Africa or the Arab world, and that is to dismantle the financial assets of what was a deep state. That then threatened the Sudan armed forces. Taken together, that becomes a really important point of contention between the two. And finally, very importantly, the transition to civilian democracy threatened, and this is extremely crucial, the stalwarts of the former Islamist regime organized around the party called the National Congress Party. It is now, without a doubt, the first spark of the war was actually instigated by members of the National Congress Party. These are hardcore, hardline Islamist officials and members of the Islamist movement in Sudan that saw in a transition to civilian democracy that necessitated their exclusion, that they saw it as an existential threat, and they sparked this conflict between the militia and their own militia linked to the Sudan armed forces in April of 2023 that quickly escalated into this huge war, first in the capital of Khartoum that became destroyed, and then it really kind of caught on like wildfire. And so right now, those who insist on the continuation of the war are essentially former Islamist members of the former regime that were literally brought out of jail after they were imprisoned during after the revolution. And so here we find ourselves in a military stalemate in terms of the military situation, but we also find intransigence on the part of the Sudan armed forces with respect to actually implementing or even entering negotiations that potentially are brokered by the United States and the other regional powers.
And can you talk a little bit about how the RSF is presenting itself to the public? I believe I remember reading that they have this kind of PR push to be like we're the anti-Islamist group, but like obviously as we're talking about here, there's no good protagonists. These are all kind of outgrowths from the same rotten foundation.
Yeah, well put. Thank you for putting it that way. The Sudan Armed Forces legitimation, kind of a public relations campaign is that this is a war for dignity and a war to really preserve the dignity of the Sudanese people against an illegal militia that they actually created and legitimated. On the part of the Rapid Support Forces, their campaign is a very simple one. It is literally the appropriation of the goals of the revolution. They are literally in the context of displacing and killing and enacting all this violence. Believe it or not, what they are saying is that they are secularist, they are pro-democracy, pro-women's rights, that they're all about diversity. And so they're essentially taking the script, all of the demands, all of the slogans of the popular pro-democracy revolution, incorporating it, establishing this parallel government, and now they're, working as hard as they can to establish institutions of law and order in order to not only maintain their economic wealth, but also to tell the Sudanese and the international community that, look, we have a stable governance structure in Darfur or, in part in territories they control. So both of them are using the social media, public relations, and of course, Sudanese are caught in the middle of those. But even though you may hear conflicting reports from Sudanese, recently, Sudanese political parties, civil society organizations in Nairobi were very clear in condemning both parties, arguing for a truce, humanitarian access, a return to a civilian democracy, and supporting a political solution rather than the continuation of this war.
But for people to bring it back to where we started as we wrap here, this group that's presenting themselves as for women's rights, pro-democracy, it has been very, very, very credibly accused of mass atrocities and war crimes, and was a part of and you can talk a little bit about what the Yale laboratory found with the satellite imagery, mass graves, burning of bodies, destruction of bodies to cover up their crimes. This was a pretty enormous report that had come out just a few days ago.
Well, there's no family or individual in Sudan that has not been victimized by the rapid support forces. So let me just give you the big picture. So all of us lost our homes, right? So I think you're from New Jersey or New York. Imagine overnight losing your home, and the militias come in and basically take over everything and begin enacting sexual violence. That's why people fled in their millions within a month. One of the largest capitals in Africa and in the Arab world, you have basically evacuated to the point of it being a ghost city. And that had to do with the level of violence the rapid support forces enacted in the urban areas. From there, of course, we begin with Darfur. In Darfur, where many of them, of course, operate, prior to al-Fashir and the reports from the Yale laboratory, you had the ethnic targeting of the Masalit with 60,000 people killed in one day in central Darfur. You then go to al-Fashir. It's not only these pictures that are showing the displacement and also the reportage. By the way, the Yale laboratory is providing such a great service because no one is able to report in Darfur. The civil society activists, human rights activists, journalists, lawyers, everyone has been executed, detained, or displaced. And this is why we have to rely on these images. But prior to that, that al-Fashir, northern Darfur, was under siege for 18 months. And I don't think people really understand what a siege is. A siege is that you basically, not only can you not leave the area, you also don't have access to food or any kind of resources. So
it's what Israel did to Gaza. What Israel did to Gaza. Yeah.
If you itemize everything that you in your show have followed in Gaza, it is the same infrastructural destruction, the same displacement, the same induced famine is what we're seeing. And so it's not just today or yesterday, it has been going on for 2.5 years now. And I just really want people to understand that. I also want people to understand in the central regions how ethnic targeted killings have, the Yale laboratory has also demonstrated that in the breadbasket of Sudan in the central part. Finally, we have now the fighting in the border areas between Sudan and South Sudan that is promising to expand the war to South Sudan itself. And I think it's really important to emphasize that in addition to the instability of the Red Sea, which is the reason that, I'm going to be frank, why the United States and the Quad have come together. These are countries that have realized the war has reached such a peak, has expanded so much that it is literally undermining their economic and strategic interests. And that's why Ben Salman asked Trump, so-called to fix this problem.
So they've reached this level of bloodshed that now it's hurting their pocketbooks. Can you speak a little bit more about South Sudan? I'll wrap with you shortly, but that secession effort, I mean, what were the outside players involved here, and why is the war expanding to South Sudan an escalation?
What South Sudan, as it separated, the people that were really involved were the United States, Norway, and the European Union, what was called the Troika. I was in Washington at the Brookings Institution, so I followed it and I was part of that. And the issue here was, very simply put, that it ended up being an agreement for secession, a divorce, so to speak, that was brokered by the Troika, the US, Norway, the EU, without any input from civil society in South Sudan or Sudan. Essentially, it was brokered by two authoritarian regimes and leaders, one in Sudan and one in South Sudan. Why is that important? Is that the government in South Sudan is not only illegitimate, it has used the majority of its oil, 90% of the revenue in South Sudan comes from the oil, to finance its military and devastate the local population in South Sudan. So I really want to emphasize how these two things are linked. Why is that important? Is that right now in the Quad, one of the things that are crucially problematic, Emma, is that we're talking about countries being brought together in absence of any Sudanese input at all. No civil society organizations are involved in these so-called talks, no political parties that are civilian. Basically, if it continues on this path, it's essentially reaffirming and legitimizing the two warring factions that have devastated the entire country. And that is exactly what happened when South Sudan seceded. even though many of us were warning that you have to include civil society, as was done in Rwanda, Liberia, Sierra Leone, in order to have a sustainable transition to peace. So these conflicts are very related. They're the worst and longest standing conflicts in Africa. And so in addition to the Red Sea, which people deeply care about because it affects 13% of trade, and Egypt has lost 50% of its trade because of the Houthi attacks that began with Gaza. That part is a really important part of this war, absolutely. But another part is South Sudan that no one seems to be interested in covering, despite the real kind of disparaging remarks the Trump administration makes about South Sudanese continually, including denying them any kind of access to come to the United States. So if you look at these two conflicts, you'll understand the predicament of the war in Sudan.
I mean, and it's just so informative and important to emphasize that we're still drawing borders on the continent of Africa based on colonial ambitions less than 15 years ago. I mean, we cannot speak about these things as past or as in ink. I mean, it is continuously changing and important to emphasize, obviously.
Absolutely. In every case, you find that there are these outside powers that are excluding, and this is the same in Yemen as well, they're excluding the local populations and the legitimate populations that can actually, kind of implement a ceasefire, monitor a ceasefire, and ensure a transition to a civilian democracy. So there are two things. One of them is this neo-colonial, of course, persistent policy where outsiders decide the fate of local populations, which I think is extremely important to highlight. But also, I think that there's a real disillusionment with respect to the very possibility of a civilian democracy in these so-called, poor countries. I mean, the disillusionment with democracy globally has, and international institutions and human rights institutions and the UN has impacted these wars, including Sudan, where there is kind of no serious discussion about conflict resolution, of human rights implementation, of actually pushing towards democracy, even though the majority of African countries are actually, believe it or not, governed by democratic institutions. And so when I see coverage that disparages the possibility of democracy in Africa, I find that really racialized and problematic. So
yes. For this show. I mean, and you're preaching to the choir in the sense of it's the same way that in the West, speaking about the Middle East, it's just that like these are savages that cannot understand our liberal democratic values, when you basically see that the Western democracies are actively over and over again undermining democratic institutions, self-actualization for people across a variety of different countries in the Middle East. And then, of course, in Africa, like it's the opposite of what the Western governments say. They want more autocrats because it's much easier to control resources if you have autocratic leaders than having to deal with the messy democracy of people wanting a say in how their resources are extracted.
Yes, I mean, there's always the discussion of Sudan and normalization with Israel because, of course, you know that we're also Arab and we work in the region and study the region. And the issue here is that normalization was going to be basically force-fed to the Sudanese population in the context of a military regime. No one has any say in terms of these huge kind of agreements. And then people in Gaza, of course, become, they don't have the time to do the research, obviously. They become astonished and despondent because they're like, why are these people in Sudan supporting something like this? Well, the fact is that they're not. The people who are being supported are these military autocrats, and they're being supported to perpetuate and implement these outside agendas. And so, the more people talk about this, and the more I know you've covered so many different countries, and also, people who actually are legitimate voices, that becomes important. It's difficult in the case of Sudan because the coverage is less, but hopefully that will increase.
I'm trying to do that with this interview. Of course, I think Gaza takes such an not outsized. It's very important, but because of our direct intervention, that sometimes the more indirect proxy ones it's harder for people to understand. So really, just lastly, I know I've kept you for quite a while, but I wanted to make sure our audience understood the aspects of this horrific conflict. What are the death tolls? Do we know? How can we know? what is your best estimate, and then even displacement figures as well?
Well, the death toll in Darfur has reached over, at least what we know, it's an underestimation, 300,000. The displacement is about 500,000 into Chad. That becomes a really big problem. The displacement within the country is 12 million. There are about 1 million in Ethiopia, 2 million that fled to Egypt, and 1.5 million in South Sudan. So basically, the country has been devastated. In addition to that, approximately 2/3 of the population is facing food insecurity, 1/3 famine. That becomes important to people to understand. A siege basically is one where people don't have access to food, so they're eating branches wherever they can. Humanitarian aid is very minimal, even not only because of the war, but also because of the lack of interest in financing, which is really important. Al-Fashir saw the displacement about 70,000 into the northern camps, and within that Al-Fashir itself, we don't know, but the estimation probably is 150,000 killed. In addition to that, the horrors, I think people will understand of mass killings, people that when you hear that people are put into graves, if you look at the report of the Yale Laboratory, some of them are put into those mass graves alive. And in addition to the sexual violence and abuse that is rampant. And there's a logic to this violence. I don't want to go into it and do this academic thing, but the level of violence really has to do with resistance. The way that insurgent organizations and militia work is that you enact a very high level of violence, and that's why it's shown on social media by the rapid support forces in order to engineer violent and coercive consent. In other words, telling people, if you don't join us, you will basically suffer these consequences. There's no other way to put it, where survival becomes the only commodity you have. And that is a logical explanation for this kind of devastation beyond the ethnic targeting and the racial discourse. But I want people to understand that there's a brutal logic to this level of violence, and that's why it is so severe and difficult to describe.
Dr. Khalid Medani, Sudanese scholar, associate professor of political science and Islamic studies, and director of the Institute of Islamic Studies at McGill University. Dr. Medani, where can people read more of your work? And I, despite my joking, people should really check out your appearance this morning on Democracy Now! If they want to learn even more.
Yeah, that Democracy Now! Is characteristically short, but so yours is longer. I have a website called khalidmedani.com, and people can go into that. I post interviews and articles there, and the most recent one is called Militants and Militias, the Authoritarian Legacies and the Political Economy of War in Sudan. It's published by the American Political Science Association newsletter, and you can just Google me, and it gives you a rundown on specifically the economic aspects of the war, and the economic underpinnings of the war, and why the war began, based on both the economic interest of the warring factions, but also the external interest as well. It's a primer. I kind of wrote it for people who are not too familiar with the war. And of course, I will recommend people watch your show, as I do all the time.
Oh, well, that's very sweet. We will put a link to that in the video description, podcast description, and at majority.fm. Dr. Medani, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Matt, and the rest of the crew. Much appreciated. Okay.
Thank you so much. We're way too late for best ofs, but that would have been one that
I literally dropped it into best of 2026 doc
Boom.
that I started yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of interview that makes me remember why I like doing my job.
It's been a long year, folks.
It's been a long year. Matt, you had a great interview this week with one Graham Plattner. What's happening over in the Jacobin Show and at Left Reckoning?
Yeah, I realized I haven't uploaded it to the podcast feed yet, but everyone can go check out on YouTube or the Twitch VOD. Talk with Graham Plattner, 45 minutes about, a few questions like why did you say you're not a socialist? Graham's not comfortable calling himself any more than an economic populist, which as far as like Senate candidates go, fine with me. And also his mercenary stuff, and also some of the other stuff that I like about him, like standing up for Somali migrants up there, and running on Medicare for all, not just in the primary, but saying he's definitely going to run it in the general, and that's kind of the reason he's running. So check that out. It was great talking with Graham yesterday.
And we have Brandon Sutton. Hello, Brandon.
Hello. I was just watching your interview.
It was not, unfortunately, cops or ICE agents with DUIs, which I know would have been.
We do other things.
Yeah, we can cover some other important topics. What's happening on the discourse?
Well, I mean, we've been doing some of what you just described, cops getting DUIs. But we just today covered Dan Bongino's, I guess, shameful exit from the FBI. Well, his tenure there was shameful in general, but his exit from the FBI. We covered
tenure at the FBI, kind of like, right? Like, he quiet
quit like in July. Yeah. He after the cover up, his job was done, and so he quiet quit the FBI in July. Then he kind of popped up like 2 weeks ago to take credit for the Jan 6 bomber being caught, and then he retired to go back to being like a Rumble billionaire or whatever he was doing before.
It's so funny because they jumped all over their Jan 6 bomber being caught thing by accusing the wrong person based on like a gait analysis, which is like how people walk. And then like they find the guy next, but they can't really even use it. I haven't really followed the story, but it's just funny. Like the first thing, it was Glenn Beck saying we have confirmation based on like how people walk. But Matt Binder.
Oh, well, check out the discourse, folks. And
Yes.
Matt Binder, what's happening with you?
No, nothing to promote today, but I would like to give a shout out to a longtime listener of this show, my dad, Binder Dad. He's been having a rough month health wise.
Oh my gosh.
And so just keep him in your thoughts. And he's watching the show right now, I'm sure. So if you want to say hello to him in the chat,
yes,
feel free. Yeah.
IMers,
hello,
step
Matt's
up
dad.
here. Yes, shout out Matt's dad. Thinking of you.
Yeah, definitely. Long time. It's been in the chat for a long time.
Yep. Well, if you want to support this program, you can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. It's not going to get to you in time for Christmas, but you can still enjoy some merch. The Max Left beanies are on the site. You can get the safety whistles as well if you're thinking about protecting your community from ICE and more. We've got merch, shop.majorityreportradio.com. All right, we will probably not take calls today because I went so long on that interview, but needed to do so. So we'll read your IMs and we'll play some clips and we'll have some fun. See you in the fun half.
Okay, Emma, please.
Well, I feel that my voice is sorely lacking on the Majority Report.
Wait. Look, Sam is unpopular.
I do deserve a vacation at Disney World. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Emma to the show.
It is Thursday.
I think you need to take over for Sam.
Yes, please.
No. I'm gonna pause you right there.
Wait, what?
You can't encourage Emma to live like this. And I'll tell you why. So was offered to tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. So was offered to tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
What?
Tour, sushi, and poker.
Tim's upset.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. So was offered to tour, sushi, and that's what we call the biz. Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Right.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
We're gonna get demonetized.
I just think that what you did to Tim Pool was mean.
Free speech.
That's not what we're about here. Look at how sad he's become now. You shouldn't even talk about it. I think you're responsible.
I probably am in a certain way, but let's get to the meltdown here.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Oh my God.
Tour,
Wow.
Sushi. I'm sorry, I'm losing my fucking mind. So was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Logic.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Boy. Tour. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid. Tour. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I had this debate 7,000 times. A little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid. Tour. I'm losing my fucking mind.
Some people just don't understand.
So I'm not trying to be a dick right now, but like, I absolutely think the U.S. should be providing me with a wife and kids.
That's not what we're talking about here. Okay, all right.
It's not a fun job. Tour? That's a real thing. That's a real thing. Real thing. Willy Wonka tour? That's a real thing. That's a real thing. Real thing. What's that offered a tour? That's a real thing. That's a real thing. Real thing. That's a real thing. That's a real thing. Real thing. What's that offered a tour? Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan has done it again. That offered a tour? That's a real thing. That's poker with the boys. I think he might be blowing it out of proportion. Real thing. That's poker with the boys. That offered a tour? That's a real thing. That's poker. Let's go, Joe. Tour? Sushi and poker with the boys. Take it easy, Dan. Tour? Sushi and poker. Things have really gotten out of hand. Sushi and poker with the boys. Delusional. Tour? Deluded. Sushi. You don't have a clue as to what's going on. Live YouTube.
Sam has like the weight of the world on his shoulders. Sam doesn't want to do this show anymore. It was so much easier when the Majority Report was just you. You were happy.
Let's change the subject.
Rangers and Knicks are doing great.
Now shut up. You don't want people saying reckless things on your program.
That's one of the most difficult parts about this show.
This is a pro-killing podcast.
I'm thinking maybe it's time we bury the hatchet.
Left is best. Ultraviolet.
Tour?
Don't be foolish and don't fucking tweet at me and don't binge. The way Emma has cucked all of these people, love it.
That's where my heart is, so I wrote my honors thesis about it.
Oh, she wrote an honest thesis. I guess I should hand the main mic to you now.
You are to the right of me on foreign policy.
We already fund Israel, dude. Are you against that?
That's a tougher question I have an answer to.
Incredible theme song.
Hi, Bumbler.
Emma Vigeland, absolutely one of my favorite people. Actually, not just in the game, like period.
We are back, folks. It is the fun half of the Majority Report. I'm going to read some of my M's here. SYM1. Hey, Matt's dad. Big fan of your work. Josh from Houston.
As in Matt Binder?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. What else could that mean, right?
Or I mean, they meant his IMs and his chats. I think that's what they meant.
Oh, true.
I guess you're also his work of art, Hinder.
I guess.
Josh from Houston just watched Matt's interview with Plattner. I am still very uncomfortable with the Merc work, and he clearly knew about the tattoo way earlier than he claimed. That said, I think he has a real chance of winning and will be a decent senator, which is more than I can say for any of the Dems running for Senate in Texas. Both are horrible on Gaza. Okay, well, I don't think.
There you go.
I mean, yeah, Tallarico
Look,
is.
people. I understand people are going to have a response to a tattoo that has associations like that. I don't think he's a secret Nazi. I think he got a badass looking tattoo in Europe, and so I think people have to I mean, I don't want to get into it so much, but there's a certain part of the left that thinks that it should have been 45 minutes of like Frost versus Nixon.
Right.
And I actually support his candidacy and don't agree that I should take him down. So, you know.
Deal with it. Jay Tingle sending vibes to wish Alan Binder well. He's probably the most important listener to the Majority Report because he's the only guy older than I am, and he's seen the Kinks.
Ah, that's his favorite band. Yeah.
Oh, I love the Kinks.
Great taste, yeah. Lots of nice messages today from Jamaica. Get well soon. A Majority enthusiast. Get well soon. Dad Binder. Vegan Van Dude. Love Binder's father. Carl Barks. Huge shout out to Binder's dad. Train Boy sending good vibes to Binder's dad. So lots of love there.
I appreciate it, everybody. I really do. I'm sure he does because I'm pretty sure he's listening. If he's not listening right now, he's going to catch it later. I know he is.
All right. Well, I'm glad. I hope he hears those and they make him smile a little bit. Susie Wiles, Emma, can you expand on your process for picking whites? This was from our Naked Wines ad read. I said, I'm picky about whites. It is quite true. Sam likes to make fun of me. When we have our, drinking studio nights, I say, get me a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, not a California one, but it's that's it. That's a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc is like fruitier and it's cheap. You can get like a $15 or $14 bottle anywhere.
No, I know a lot about wine. I'm just saying that you're anti-American.
Oh, I understand. Although maybe the tariffs are going to screw me on that front. But this is why I need naked whites to expand my palette on whites. Red, I'll drink anything. Future reactionary. Who's scooping who? Y'all got one up on Amy's short segments. Goodman.
That's what they call it.
Good.
Short segments.
Short
We're
segments.
Low on time.
She's just too obsessed with
Amy.
She's just too obsessed with TikTok now. She's not been
I
the same
know.
since she's become like a TikToker.
She's such a cloud chaser, Amy. Goodman.
Yeah. Short attention span media.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't wait for her to box Logan Paul or whatever.
Amy Goodman, reading the chat. Thanks for the sub.
She's making a deal with Saudi Arabia to build a theme park, a Democracy Now! Theme park, like Mr.
Oh my
Beast.
God. Can you imagine? Galactic Nurse Boogs. This interview about the Sudanese conflict is the best I've seen on describing the conflict, also terrifying if this war on civilians becomes precedent. Snake Santa's coal hole. By the way, if it is a peacemaker and a fighter, which is what it sounds like, how effing stupid and contradictory. Oh, you're talking about Melania? Yeah, I mean, well, they say peace through strength. That's like their mantra, which is just an excuse to be violent. Okay. Swing State, I'm very picky about my whites. Has to be a drop. Maybe not on this show. Someone else, maybe RM Brown can pick up on that one. Let's do some clips. What number is this, Matt?
This is actually just a Matt special.
Okay.
I have AI data centers on mine after the earlier discussion, and there's the comment made about China and its approach, and that sort of underlined all of these hysterical appeals that Bernie. Here's what Bernie had to say. He prompted all this stuff because he said this. We'll just play this.
Thanks for joining me. Let us be clear. AI and robotics are the most transformative.
This is one of the first times "Let us be clear" it wasn't followed by bullshit by a politician.
Let us be clear. AI and robotics are the most transformative technologies in the history of humanity and will have a profound impact on the lives of every man, woman, and child in our country. Just a few points that we need to be thinking about. One, who is aggressively pushing these technologies? Well, surprise, surprise. It happens to be the very wealthiest people on earth, people like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Peter Thiel, Bill Gates, and other multi-billionaires. So here is a very simple question I'd like you to think about. Do you believe that these guys, these multi-billionaires, are staying up nights worrying about what AI and robotics will do to the working families of our country and the world? Well, I don't think so. I think that these very, very rich men want even more wealth and even more power. And for a whole bunch of reasons, that is very dangerous. Number two.
I think we can kind of get the point there. He is calling for a moratorium on these data centers deployments
Until we can figure out what the hell is going on.
And we're seeing a lot of people, Elon Musk, the take is like, Bernie will eventually follow the makers, but they're too cowards and lack any sense of adventure. Bernie says, I do lack adventure. When that adventure will, as you've made clear, force tens of millions of workers out of their jobs.
He called Bernie a coward. Isn't he the guy that like had to go into a medically induced coma because he was so embarrassed by getting booed at Dave Chappelle's show in San Francisco?
Yeah. Don't post where my plane is.
He banned me from Twitter because he claimed I posted his assassination coordinates.
Oh gosh, I forgot about that, Binder. How could I?
Would you post his forehead?
So I do want to credit Rokana here jumping in because Rokana is someone who does have associations with Silicon Valley. So I'm glad he's stepping in on the right side of this here. The AI revolution must be for all of us, not them. The goal should be to push it in the direction of helping workers, not tech barons. I represent Silicon Valley and proudly stand with Bernie over Elon Musk. I mean, great tweet there. Chris Freeman, the vast majority of technological revolutions have benefited from all of us. And Rokana says it took 60 years for that to happen with the Industrial Revolution. I do want to say it's not the Industrial Revolution. Anyone who says it's the Industrial Revolution is a stupid person. It's not going to be comparable to the Industrial Revolution. Maybe it'll be comparable to the internet. By the way, what was the internet? How did that make all of your jobs? Was that done for everyone's jobs, or did everyone's life improve after that, or is it maybe still stagnant? So we have this clip here from the Copper Courier, and this is on the sheet. Do you know what number this is, Brian? This is activists turning their backs in Arizona as politicians approve a data center energy deal. I'm not sure if this is the one that Cinema was pushing, but this is just to show where the Popular Energy is on this.
We are adjourned. Thank you, Commissioner Walden. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, though.
Copper Courier covering that. This is per our earlier interview, we're seeing the increase of many of these kind of this opposition to these AI data centers, and I'll open this up to you guys in just a sec, but just to give people a sense, I read a part of this earlier on. The Verge published, there was a study done, this PhD candidate published this at the VU Amsterdam Institute for Environmental Studies. It was published in the journal Patterns yesterday. And it basically says that, building on earlier research, they found that the power demand for AI globally could reach 223 gigawatts this year, surpassing the amount of electricity used for Bitcoin mining in 2024. The figures that he calculated in terms of the electricity that these AI systems will likely consume, he calculated it to find it in between 32.6 and 79.7 million tons of pollution annually. For comparison, New York City emits around 50 million tons of carbon dioxide annually. So it's comparable to New York City. And in terms of the water that's going to be guzzled, AI could use between 31.25 and 764.6 billion liters of water this year, according to this analysis, which is even higher than previous estimates. So this is like the equivalent of one of the most major cities in the country or in the world in terms of what it's going to emit.
And accepting the frame that we are in a race with China about this technology, are we even sure that listening to David Sachs and Elon Musk and all of these fucking charlatans like Bill Gates is the way to win that? And this is a clip from a podcast that I follow because my gaming PC is 6 years old and I'm in the market for a new one called Moore's Law is Dead. But this is them talking about the different approaches to AI and also our approach, even under Biden, under the CHIPS Act. And I think this is something that, this isn't coming from a leftist perspective. These are industry folks. This is also with a guy from Scott Galloway's podcast, one of their markets guys. But here's Moore's Law is Dead, and this guy talking about the CHIPS Act and then our competition with China. And I think people might be interested to hear this.
And I remember at the time, everyone going, the U.S. government just promised, it was an insane amount. It was like $55 billion to help Intel build foundries in Ohio. And at first I was like, well, this is a pretty big deal. This will at least keep them afloat. But over time, it became clear that it was like, are these, former auto manufacturers, like workers, really going to put on white suits and work in a foundry in Ohio now? And like, how much of I think we've learned that a lot of the money and the checks haven't even gotten to Intel. And then you look at Intel's current problems as well. And do they have problems filling capacity? So why on earth would they be building more capacity that would cost them more money? And I'm wondering what you think about that and just in general, how the CHIPS Act has been handled, because from where I'm sitting at this point, I don't know if I would call it a failure, but it makes me very concerned about, frankly, the tech literacy of the U.S. government and world governments in general, where they're like, well, let's build a bunch of fabs. And you realize Intel's actually making...
Fabs are these things that make these chips, just for folks following along.
Most of their laptop chips from TSMC right now, which is mind-blowing. They're using TSMC.
TSMC's in Taiwan.
To make their stuff. and no one, not that many people, I guess they just probably, I think they just had an announcement someone's going to use it, but like they're still having trouble filling their own foundries. And if you really wanted to catch up to China and like semiconductor manufacturing, you have a lot of cheap companies that make metal heat sinks to cool the CPU, the PCBs. That is what America's lacking. We have plenty of foundries, and yet I still see politicians in the US say stuff like, we need more capacity, when our capacity isn't filled.
100%. And I think what we're learning is that the big innovation in AI right now, it's not going to be capacity, it's going to be efficiency. And as you say, that's where China is absolutely whooping America's butt right now, is on efficiency. I mean, this AI problem and the AI build out, and we're hearing about all of the trillions of dollars that we're going to spend on building these data centers, hearing a little bit less about the trillions of dollars we're going to have to spend on building out the power generation that's going to actually keep the lights on in those data centers. That is a huge question. Meanwhile, you've got OpenAI and Sam Altman saying they're going to build 250 gigawatts worth of energy capacity and compute, which is a quarter of all power on the American electric grid. It's just, the numbers are unfathomable. So the argument in America, and it often is the argument in America, is we need to build. We need to have more power. We need to drill, baby, drill. We need to build nuclear power plants. We need to build more energy to have and supply and to power the largest and the glitziest and most glamorous AI models in the world. China has a different approach, and China's approach is, whether it's intentional or not, we're going to try to do this in the most efficient way possible. We're going to make sure it's efficient in terms of energy. We're going to make sure it's efficient in terms of cost. And that is exactly what they're doing. And Alibaba just last week had.
And you can listen to him list examples of them doing that. Right. We are, even in the terms of our race with China, we are trusting charlatans who aren't there to build AI to make the new industrial revolution. They're there to make money. Like, that's their imperative. That's the only thing they give a fuck about. They don't care about beating China. They want to line their pockets. When it was useful to offshore manufacturing to China, they did it. But now China's state capacity is way beyond the US. They are outstripping us, not only in infrastructure, but also in this sort of shit. And it is a matter of time. When our generation's kids grow up to be our age, the idea that America is the leader in any of this shit will be a fucking joke. It'll be for the past.
Yeah, and you can just see there's great power competition being used to benefit capitalists, which has happened throughout the 20th and 21st century. Go on.
Right. One of the big AI companies in China, DeepSeek, their big model that they released last year, which caused shockwaves in the AI industry, was trained with just 6% of the funding that OpenAI used to train GPT-4, which was the comparable model at the same time when they both came out. I mean, if the race to defeat China when it comes to if there is a race to defeat China when it comes to AI, it's not about spending more. It's about doing more, doing as efficiently as possible, because that's where China is actually destroying us. If we want to talk about like a race, like that's where they're actually becoming better at technology. They're doing it comparably or even better, but they're doing it more efficiently and much less costly. And so the idea that we got to give these guys more and more is ludicrous.
And it's for an ideological reason. It's because our imperative is to make as much money for the investors in this company as possible. China's imperative is to make this as productive as possible. That is the capitalist difference. When your economy is entirely controlled by people who are just trying to make more money out of money, then that's what you're going to see. And so they have to promise AI God and data centers on the moon, which is just stuff to remove investors from their money to keep the hype cycle going.
Well, I mean, just to go back to like the issue of AI data centers in America, I don't know if you saw this particular story that was coming out of North Texas, but the grid, and North Texas isn't the only place that's like this, the grid is already not so great. The infrastructure, the electrical infrastructure in a lot of places in America is not so great. And data centers adding extra, load to these like already strained grids at times in our country, like the winter, for example, in northern Texas, where we're prone to deep freezes and a rolling blackout can mean life or death. It's something worth considering, especially as like the climate becomes more inhospitable in places all around the country. Like rolling blackouts as a result of AI data centers overtaxing the grid is, might have like some human cost towards, maybe even this winter, if it continues to just not be a priority.
Yep. I mean, but that was part of what we covered, and it's becoming a electoral issue, and it's becoming a way that's activating people on the ground, as we saw with some of that footage.
And you'll get a wrong impression on how unpopular it is based on all the tech people on X that are like, Bernie doesn't understand. He's jealous.
Right. Bernie. Ugh. Bernie's jealous. That's him. Rings true. You want to do? Let's do 8 here. Joe Rogan had one of his buddies back on the show. The man most victimized. Say it again.
CIA agent or tech billionaire?
No, close. I mean, that would have been a good guess. This is somebody who's been more victimized by peer review than anybody in the world.
Brett Weinstein.
Well, yes.
And I would say
conspiracy theorist. Okay.
Brother of Eric Weinstein, who is the managing director at Peter Thiel, Peter Thiel's Thiel Capital. So the tech thing was right on.
Well,
what a coincidence that he got his story sort of picked up at Evergreen College, just one remove from Peter Thiel. I bet that was organic.
What a coincidence that the other day Joe Rogan was talking about how Jesus could be reincarnated via artificial intelligence, and he has all of these connections to AI and tech billionaires across the country and the world. It's really interesting. We were talking about him the other day, and I think he's just reached this level of wealth where he's in his bunker in Texas. He took hundreds of millions of dollars from Spotify, and where like you'll see how Theo Vaughn and Andrew Schultz are kind of audience captured, where they'll ride the vibes of Zoran Mamdani because he's popular, but they'll also be like riding the vibes of Trump because their audience of bros kind of likes him more than that bitch Kamala. And so they'll like, they're still audience captured, but he's just in a completely gold encased echo chamber. And I don't even understand how anyone listens to the show anymore. It is completely insufferable. The billionaires coming on there, just spewing their propaganda. It's obvious what this show is meant to be at this point. But I guess he still has some time for old friends.
He's kind of like right-wing Bill Maher now. Like he's kind of just become that sort of archetype where it's all just for him.
Right-wing Bill Maher's a bit of a little redundant.
Right.
They're sort of like the left center and the right center.
Yeah. But so Brett went on the Joe Rogan Experience, and Brian told me before the show that this theory of his is completely indecipherable, and I'm curious to find out.
You'll understand what he's saying, but the way he says it is just crazy.
With NPR
also,
voice.
I love
also,
science.
he's dressed like I dress when I have to go to court.
Yeah. Oh, right. Oh, gosh. The black dress shirt, man.
He's just like John Wick.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but like this was the worst of prom is what this makes me flash back to.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with a black dress shirt. Excuse me.
There's a lot wrong with a black dress shirt, my friend. I'm sorry to tell you. Are you a waiter or are you not? All right, let's go.
Just a quick point. We talk about what's wrong with men. One problem is that some of them are devoting 3 hours of their day to listen to Joe Rogan talking to this guy.
Yeah.
What it is that will need to be done. But I think we talked about this last time. People are not going to be coherent absent purpose. They need to have purpose. And it used to be that biology itself forced purpose onto you, right? On the frontier, the ability to win a mate, to provide enough shelter, consistent enough food, all of the things necessary.
I'm sorry.
On the frontier is
so
he just in the wild?
Can you well is he talking about hunter gatherers? Because
that's what I'm not sure, but yeah, that's what his book was about.
That's like a pre-capitalist utopia. Like we need to be talking about freaking capitalism. But if he's talking about the settlers in this country, they were heavily economically incentivized by the government to settle the West. That is how it worked. It wasn't biology itself making this case for them. Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, guys like this have like a very romantic idea about what like pre-society like looked like. They don't know, they imagine it was like this all-encompassing state of war that benefited the strong because they're authoritarian now. But no, people were in social groups. People had social norms. People had like pre-development forms of social organization where they were less exploitative of one another because they couldn't be. They couldn't afford to be. But in like their mind, like, yeah, no, it was all like, I don't know, alpha male beating their chest, but that's not really how it ever really worked until capitalism came along and convinced people that that was natural.
Right. And if it were like that, then Weinstein should fear that more than anything in the world.
He really should.
The idea that he'd be shoving arrowheads into a buffalo is insane.
It becomes like that, you know, during like the monarchies of Europe, but other than that, like, you know, on the frontier.
Right.
Frontier.
I just like the idea that he's romanticizing basic survival as some sort of purpose. Is this how far we've fallen in society? That is what we have to look back to?
Also, like, nobody was going...
Go ahead, Matt.
I was saying,
I was
the
gonna say-
frontier is the frontier is not a place that people went because like, oh, biology just says you'll have so much fun there. It was an outlet for class conflict.
Yeah.
Like you can't. Why were like like the sort of early colonialism? It wasn't the first son who was going to get all the inheritance. It was like the second and third sons who needed to go make up wealth and extract it from like fucking Jamaica because their oldest brother was going to get all the inheritance. These are imperatives. Biology, there's a famous clip, I don't know if I'll be able to find it, but where Brett Weinstein is on a stage with Richard Dawkins, the evolutionary biologist. And he's like, you know, and Brett says like, yeah, I think World War II was a little bit explained by genetics. And Richard Dawkins says like, actually, I think we should leave some of this stuff to the historians. And that's always where Weinstein goes wrong. He thinks biology can explain all this. But here's the thing. When you hear somebody call himself an evolutionary biologist, they're probably full of shit, especially if they focus on the psychology that they project onto that evolutionary process. But let's just there's more to this.
I was going to say, you know, he's Weinstein's saying it in his usual delivery that he thinks makes him sound smart. But this is like the most basic level, like right-wing meathead type of belief. Yeah. Like they truly feel like the modern world has emasculated them. Like they don't feel like men anymore because they think they would have been like hunters and big, strong, you know, guys back in the days where you would have to fight for your food and hunt and everything, which is ludicrous because these are the same guys who highlight that, you know, bringing children in the world and being a good father. Well, you know, you can't actually square that peg because back in those days when you were hunting for food, there were a lot of fathers dying in their 20s by a wild boar and leaving their kids fatherless. So, you know, the modern world is actually giving you a really good way to be a good father, but you guys want to be, you know, performatively manly, and you're missing the forest for the trees here.
Meanwhile, half these guys are hooked on benzos because of mean internet comments.
Right. I mean,
big alpha.
Did they have testosterone injections on the frontier for Rogan or whatever? Anyway, keep going.
That was a full-time occupation. It was difficult. Not everybody could pull it off. And so it created a very concentrated purpose. You succeeded if you managed in this environment to do all those things and leave some offspring who were well adjusted to the situation.
That's not true, actually.
Pause it. Go ahead, Brandon.
Hunter-gatherers had a lot of like time off, actually. That's like a common misconception. They had a lot of time for like building societal like bonds. They spent a lot of time just like chilling. There were times that were harsh, but most of them were pretty good at it. That's why they were able to live subsistently. So like they weren't struggling all the time. They like danced and sang and like made art and everything. Things that like the Joe Rogan Experience listeners think are like womanly. They did them all the time for like fun.
They were also,
you know, they didn't have like Fortnite.
Yeah, they were also in many ways like deeply isolated. I still can't decide if he's talking about hunter-gatherers or settlers on the frontier. But yeah, like on the frontier, they were incredibly isolated and like, you know, beating their wives, maybe, or like.
I mean, it's
dying
incredibly lonely at best.
Yes, of the elements. Anyway.
Our environment, there is nothing like this. And the winning a mate has been turned into chaos. What does it even mean? Are there mates out there that you would want to win? Are they interested in reproducing?
Or do they listen to Joe Rogan?
These guys are always complaining, but you know what? Like, there are plenty of ladies out there who are conservative. They would just have to go to church. But these guys don't like traditional, like, masculinity when it is a constricting of them. Like anyone else, they want their cake and eat it too. They don't like gender roles. They rebel and they stomp their feet against like feminism and sexism. But they actually have a lot of things in common with feminists because they hate traditional gender roles, which they find to be very constricting. They don't want to go to church and spend their time there on Sunday. They don't want to work hard and have hard jobs. They want to play video games. Half the Joe Rogan listeners, they want to play EA, FC1, or they want to watch like MMA games. Because ultimately, all they would have to do is go to church. Nothing but Trump's tariff keeps you from working on a farm right now. None of this stuff is like being kept from you. You just don't want to do it. But like in reality, this is less about like what it means to be a man and more about like what it means to get a girl. And
yes, well,
betting on UFC
bit.
fights on DraftKings, you know?
Yeah, right. Like, you don't have that on the frontier.
Right. And like I just love how he's romanticizing the idea of a time when women maybe had like zero options except the guy, one of the 2 or 3 people that were living in like the Great Plains or something like that, or they had some sort of arranged marriage or whatever. I mean, he's basically
age gap.
Yeah, I'm running the gamut because I still don't know what time in history he's actually referring to here. It could be the 1800s. It could be like, I don't know, in medieval times. So whatever he's speaking about is a little bizarre, but,
Are they interested in raising children? Are they going to, farm that job out to some crazy person who believes you can switch gender by just saying you've done it? Right?
What?
So
probably not, Brett.
What is he talking about? Surrogates?
Surrogates. He's talking about crazy trans
You're gonna have
surrogates.
trans surrogates.
all the trans surrogates that are widely available to people.
It sounds oddly specific.
Yes, it seems like
What happened
something.
to you, Brett?
Yeah, who hurt you? Which trans surrogate hurt you? And
like I've heard of horrible cases of like tensions arising between a surrogate and the parents. I've never heard of trans people like inserting themselves unwanted into that process before.
It does feel incredibly specific and also very oriented towards the class that both of these guys are in as wealthy grifters. Who can affording a surrogate? I mean, like that is for if you're not a wealthy, a wealthy gay man and you're a gay couple, it's difficult to have kids. But he's like trans surrogates. I mean, that's the people we're
It
hearing
is
about all
such
the
rich
time.
people problems. It's
Yeah.
like, what if my cleaner was like Trenda Aragua?
the purpose has become incoherent.
Yeah.
The subordinate purposes, which came later, right? The ability to invest in a career, to climb some corporate ladder. It doesn't sound very appealing to me, but at least I understand what it is, right? At least, okay, there's a game. The company wants certain things accomplished. To the extent that you accomplish them better than your competitors, you rise farther. It leaves you an income that you can spend in whatever way you want. That will impress a mate, right? It's at least understandable. The puzzle that we have given people now is completely incoherent.
Wait, but you
I agree with that.
But didn't he just describe like a 9 to 5? I mean, I don't even understand.
Well,
anyway.
Somebody in the
tell you right
comments
now-
decoded. I guess he's talking, when he says farm that job out, he's talking about public education.
Okay.
Well, I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm not a pickup artist. I'm not mystery. I'm not peacocking, but I'm gonna take a wild stab in the dark and tell you that most women do not like this. They do not. they are not going to be attracted to this. This is not it, my friend.
When you talk about
So,
finding a mate, or what did he say earlier? Like
Winning a mate.
winning a mate. When you talk about it like a race or something like that, that's not appealing.
I gotta say, like, it is conservative women who are having trouble finding conservative men worth a fucking damn.
Yeah.
And it's because they're all ruining their lives listening to this sort of pity party bullshit all the time. I mean, or Nick Fuentes, for instance. Like, yeah, you are fucking yourself up. You are picking a scab that is making it more apparent, and you're making yourself less, frankly, lovable, which is horrible. It's a really horrible thing that all these people do to all these guys. Like, nobody like me is out there worrying that a guy who, with all this knowledge given to him by Brett Weinstein or Andrew Tate or Jordan Peterson, is going to be out there pulling the women. Like that's not a concern for anybody.
No, it shouldn't be. Ramona Frankenstein, just so we're clear, manifest destiny is biology, but me growing F-cup breasts at 29 is heresy.
Oh, guys, I got to head out early today. So
no problem.
Yeah,
No
so
problem.
just saying happy holidays, Merry Christmas,
Happy holidays.
Hanukkah, Happy New Year. Love you all. And I will
Kwanzaa.
see you guys all very soon. Take care. Have a great
All right.
rest of the show.
Sending love to the whole family.
Take care.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Love.
Bye.
Bye. Jeet hears smoke alarm, says a friend of the told me Platinum's cover-up tattoo was of Fenrir and Celtic designs, and his 1919 tattoo was a code for SS. As grateful as I am for this conclusive proof, I'm getting a little annoyed at my fellow leftist friends. Thank you for being voices of reasons for a great candidate. That 1919 thing is a camping tattoo.
National park
thing.
Really dorky.
People are like, there's
Literal-minded schizophrenics.
yeah, it's the internet.
But I mean, if you can decode something based off of an icon, then all your work is done for you.
Remember this?
This? Don't throw that up.
Sorry.
I mean, a lot of people did do that on purpose.
Okay. I'm sorry.
It's kind of the opposite. It is true that a lot of people
Wait,
use
I got
that sign.
distracted. What? Wait, I got distracted. Did someone throw
I accidentally
up
did an
Threw up
offensive
the
symbol.
OK sign that
Did you
Groypers
do?
were.
Oh, I thought you did a gamer salute. I wasn't looking. I was like, whoa.
I did find the Brett
Hit the
Weinstein
gamer
thing.
salute.
Why did I do that? Anyway.
But I mean, honestly,
my point is just that, like, I didn't even
That
know
doesn't
that
mean
was
you're
an
a Nazi.
offensive.
Exactly.
Slow. I didn't know that was
Yes.
offensive at all, ever.
it's kind of the same. It actually makes the point. It just,
Yeah.
you should have had video of it.
God
You should have
damn.
said, hypothetically, if I put the OK sign up.
All
Talking
right.
about, like, the Knicks winning the cup or something like that. You're just a real quick here. Here's what I was talking about with Brett Weinstein talking about populations and genetics, and Richard Dawkins, the evolution guy, saying, actually, I think maybe we should leave this one to the historians.
So what you have are these population against population conflicts. If you view it as group selection, it makes no sense. But if you view them as lineages, it makes a great deal of sense. And the belief structures that caused people to step onto battlefields and fight were clearly comprehensible as adaptations of the lineages in question.
I think nationalism might be an even greater evil than religion. And I'm not sure that it's actually very helpful to talk about it in Darwinian terms. I think it's, perhaps this might be a case where we do need to defer a little bit to historians and non-biologists and think about it in other ways.
I remember that.
No,
I need him to follow me
that's-
around and check me every day.
Yeah.
That's the exact wrong way to think about things like that, because that is just a hop, skip, and a jump away from racism.
Yeah.
And that's just why, so much of the work of early 20th century anthropologists was decoupling things like culture and language and society from, like, lineages and genes and things like that, because it was so deeply rooted in, like, the bigotries of the time.
Right. Let's you want to do this Candace Owens stuff? Yeah, sure. All right.
Oh, gosh.
15, 16, I think, right? Yeah, I'll intro it. Candace Owens did her meeting with Erica Kirk. This was hotly anticipated in right-wing circles. She I saw that she had something like 300,000 concurrent live viewers at one point on her live stream.
Yep.
It now has 4 million people watching in post.
Which is not her highest lately. I think that we might have seen peak on this, but you know.
I mean, it's concerning that this.
I think she gave up. I'm being honest with you. I'm very disappointed. I'm not watching. I think she quit. I think I'm disgusted a little bit.
Are you gonna rage quit because she quit?
No, I'm not going to quit. I'm just going to stop watching. She's changed up on me.
I mean, people seem to be pretty disappointed by the fact that she dropped some of the many theories that she had about Turning Point USA. Let's start here. This is 15, because this is the point that I think is the most salient or the most important in terms of what came out of this, long live stream that she did, which is basically that she expressed regret for some things, but in particular here, she expresses regret for coming for Turning Point USA's finances. And I think this just kind of betrays the truth about this whole right-wing ecosystem, which is basically there's this unspoken rule here. Say whatever you want, be as inflammatory, and sometimes that's beneficial. Say a news outlet will pick up on it, and the Democratic politician will call you racist or misogynistic. That's good for you. Say whatever you want. But if even we can fight amongst one another, and that's good for business. But do not mess with our money. And that's kind of the rule that seems to bind these freaks together. And this is her, I think,
climb down.
They were sort of most upset with obviously a bit of a fever pitch, when I tweeted that it was a godforsaken company and people should not give money to it. And I have to own that's aggressive. That is actually aggressive in the retrospect. I was very frustrated. And I don't know, I felt like we weren't getting any answers and there were so many lies. And then I was getting attacked for asking all meaningful questions that was within their capacity to answer. And I told you, I definitely, my problem in life is that I can rise to anger very quickly.
Oh, really?
I shared with them that I really felt like I was under attack for telling the truth from the very beginning, casually, when I mentioned the Catholicism thing. What was that about? I was like, look, I say something in a tribute to him. Alex Clark and Andrew Colvett then jump onto a podcast and they're doing that weird interview, which is clearly that they were sort of most.
All right.
So a lot of this she still has a lot of grievances with a number of the individuals involved. It was fascinating because I agree with you, Brandon, that this was a pretty big climb down on a large number of issues. It starts off, and she knows that. So she starts off, this is the very beginning of it, where she is compensating for that with a little bit of anti-Semitism.
Oh.
Okay, everybody, Shabbat Shalom. I just want to say Shabbat Shalom to everybody back at home. Happy Hanukkah to our greatest friends and allies. And, this is a good time to mention that Israel does have a right to defend itself. Tucker Carlson is Adolf Hitler. And TikTok does need to be purchased by the Mossad. It's just how I'm feeling today. I am not different. Maybe you are different.
Can you pause this?
Yeah, I mean, so desperate to pretend oh yeah, you know what? I've changed, so I must have been brainwashed by the Mossad. But actually, I did change, but for money reasons. I don't know.
Right.
It's,
God.
It's just so disappointing. No principles. No principle.
Well, I mean, her principle of being anti-Semitic is one of her more consistent ones. And the fact that she throws that there, conflating. She's doing the work for Benjamin Netanyahu by continuously conflating Jewish people, saying something like Shabbat Shalom, and then bringing up Mossad and Zionism. Jose, a creator, a video essayist that we've referenced a bunch on this show, did a really good breakdown of, some of her conspiracism and how she throws out a lot of hearsay or sources that don't lead anywhere. And it's all like, and then draws them together to create, glues them together to create something that resembles a narrative, but doesn't really have any endpoint. And he points out that like when you may see clips of her railing against the genocide, but when you see her episodes in full, the anti-Semitism is not subtle. It's not subtle at all. And it actually is really like concerning. I mean, not actually. It's very concerning and it's getting worse. Like this is a story that's outside of this drama, but Aiden Ross, I guess is friends with the wide receiver on the Los Angeles Rams, Puka Nacua. And they were doing what they like rubbing hands together. I don't want to do it on air. But it's like an anti-Semitic meme, and he said, do the Jewish dance. And that's what he was saying on stream with Puka Nacua. And I think Puka might have done one of the dances in the end zone at some point. I'm not sure if that was the same one, but it's just getting very mainstreamed. And she's a huge part of it with that large viewer base. And this is exactly what we said in the immediate, beginning of this genocide is that the more that we conflate Zionism with Judaism, the right will capture this and use it for their advantage. And she is she's a big part of perpetuating hatred towards Jews in this country.
Here is her. This is talking about. I mean, kind of saving face a little bit, saying that she does, and this is where we get to the point where nobody comes out looking from this better. I don't think Candace got out of this meeting what she wanted, and I don't think TPUSA Erica did, because she continues to say stuff like this, which is the main problem that TPUSA is, which is they want this to be open and shut. Yeah. And Candace is not that way. So here's what she says just briefly.
They have not seen anything that you have not seen, is what I want you to know. So with that in mind, I'm sitting here going, why are you signaling? Why do I feel like the public's being gaslit on this? There's been nothing that's convincing. There are so many commentators who have gone out and said to you, it's overwhelming. The evidence is overwhelming. The text messages that don't have a date, that don't even sound real, that's overwhelming. That to me feels really fake and gay. I really do.
That's a griper sort of fake and gay thing. Yeah.
Oh, so even though she's sort of feuding with Fuentes, she's appealing to his audience?
Same audience, yeah. It's all right-wing freaks. But so she says, there's no more evidence. So, why are you getting on me for making all these accusations that, you're in on it? And just one little example here of how this played out. There's this huge section here, and you can put this up, Brian. There's a huge section here that goes on for minutes about these call logs, these Mikey McCoy call logs. Now, Mikey McCoy is a guy who conspiracy theorists zeroed in on is after the shot of Charlie Kirk was shot, it looked as if he put his phone up to his ear, and people were saying he was confirming the eagle has landed or something like that. They subsequently said that he put he actually just was covering his ears and had his phone in his hand. But anyway, so Candace said, I need to see these call logs. So here is just a little bit of them talking about these call logs here. And the whole, let me just let it run. Got that up.
Person he called was his wife. He called fast. Why don't you go? Go. That's why he walked away. Why don't you go? And just told him, this is what the first thing you do is. Well, he didn't do that. Actually, the first person he called was his wife. He called Elizabeth McCoy. And then he stayed on the phone with his wife for 10 minutes. And during those 10 minutes, he three-wayed Erica 3 minutes after the shot went off. And then he three-ways his father. And then he three-ways a third person who I am not interested in.
So the problem here is that he said he called Candace right away, but the truth, it turns out, according to the call logs Candace saw, was he called his wife and then they put Erica on the call, which to me kind of doesn't seem that crazy.
No.
And so Candace is to be fair to Candace, she says, I appreciate this information. I wish we had this all the time. This is the only type of thing I was looking for when I was casting aspersions, that guy was like...
It sounds like a white lie where he's like, yeah, I called you right away.
They didn't want to, I think probably didn't want to include his wife in the national story.
Yeah.
So instead of calling Erica right away, he called his wife and then they added Erica to that call.
Yes.
But then people in Candace's audience on Instagram point out, well, why do you even trust those call logs in the first place? And here's what Candace said later on Instagram Live.
Why do you trust the call logs? They could have been fabricated.
you're absolutely right. They could have been fabricated. But if they fabricated him, to whose benefit? It like actually made it seem like everybody lied. So of course they were in fact like edited. It wasn't the full call log uninterrupted printed from the website because they wanted to just show me the relevant portions. But that's all we had. I would prefer to sit down with Mikey and
just pause. The same incentive that you said 48 hours ago for the lack of calling Erica Kirk would exist in them fabricating the call logs, right?
Well, I mean, I think this goes back to what Matt was saying, and I think in reference to the video, she's not a very principled conspiracy theorist. Her main form of conspiratorial like content is just sowing doubt in really aimless ways about the traditional narrative, just asking questions, just like repeating what the story is, but with a weird tone of voice, right? To make it seem like it's all much more suspicious than it actually is. But she has no real endpoint in mind. She has no real overarching narrative in mind. This is just like to keep people addicted from minute to minute. And I think a lot of people are just like kind of half listening when they listen to Candace Owens' show. Like no one would admit it because they'll pretend like, oh no, I listened to the whole thing. Like she's always doing this. Like they're all just like half listening. And so like from moment to moment, she's jumping from piece to piece, which might keep you entertained. But overall, she doesn't have like any real endpoint in mind. She doesn't have like a grand villain in mind. And she's not really even investigating. Every episode, she puts like a new piece on the board that doesn't connect to any other piece.
Right. She is grifting off his death in a way that contradicts the way that others are grifting off his death, where they want this to be about TPUSA, and the donors wanted to still be Zionists. The donors wanted to still maintain like the more traditional Republican line because that's in part what Kirk represented to them.
That's why it's valuable to them.
He was influence over young people that feuded with Fuentes, feuded with the anti-Semitic right wing and like more like legitimately Nazi side of the party, and so they're trying to control it, and they want to control it for the Republican political project. Candace Owens just cares, and she literally said, I don't care about the midterms. Like, she cares about making money, and she's doing a really good job of that, given the view count that I just mentioned. But it seems like the audience is not thrilled here, right, Matt?
These are the top comments of 75,000 of them.
4 million views.
Transparency is the top one. Transparency is never found in private meetings. Hey, that's like the start of the Majority Report. In the boardrooms of the elite. That's where deals are made. Next person. I think I just realized we the people will never be allowed to know no. They're already using her little phrases against her. My advice is to put the phones down and go outside. Eric, great job there. Candace, weren't you the one going after Erica for publicly grieving Charlie, then deciding not to answer questions publicly? Now you have private meetings after doing public investigations. It's a big club and we are in it. 4.5 hours of conversation, yet people are still confused. This is amazing.
Yeah, she's losing them. But to be fair, I think Candace has positioned herself well because of the kinds of like lack of real, I don't know, like coherency that her conspiracy theories have to pivot back and forth from one position to another. So if they push back enough and she starts getting enough pushback, she's just going to go back. She's going to go after TPUSA again. Like I think that, she's left herself enough room to like just reignite tensions whenever it benefits her.
Yeah. That's true. That's true.
I mean, this is actually like an immune system response we're seeing by people's brains. It was at this moment I realized that I need to get off the internet. If I'm going to be destroyed by this system, let it be in person, not due to corrosion of my mind and spirit because of the totally avoidable influence of social media.
Oh, man.
That's a great point. That's a great point. He's right.
It would probably be beneficial if the Candace fans logged off, but I do get sad reading something like that. People are lost.
What is it? The lives of quiet desperation.
Also, it's important to realize that she's not going to stop doing Charlie Kirk conspiracy theorists. Her next episode after this is still about conspiracy theorists. About conspiracy theories about Charlie Kirk's death. It's just she's like, not going after TPUSA in them right now. Now it's back to like the FBI and like ballistics and NCIS style stuff. So it's right. It's more of a pivot.
Sounds like the JFK conspiracy, Matt. Ballistics instead
Oh
of...
yeah, exactly. You get into this sort of scientific stuff instead of the actual connections.
Although that one's a real conspiracy as opposed to whatever's going on here.
Yeah. But people can be misled in either direction by the just thinking like this is what a bullet does because
Right.
I know science.
Yeah.
Like people are saying like this a 30-06 would do this. It's like, well, you could read a bunch of criminal cases where it got stuck in the body. So what now?
Right.
Turns out that your like assessment of physics, maybe this is why people love this is actually going back to the Barrett Weinstein thing. Why people, especially white men, love biology is because you don't need to bother with all that history. I don't even need to learn about any of that shit. I have the sort of like secret pattern that explains all of that stuff that I can, go on with my day without learning any of it.
It also validates the higher elevation in society if you say it's all biological as opposed to like we made decisions as in a patriarchal capitalist society and there was chattel slavery and yeah.
I'm producer of the Majority Report because of my genes.
Right. Future Reactionary said, can I just say, if you're not a Mainer, please STFU about Plattner. Don't vote for him because you can't. Don't piss in the punch bowl because someone else's leftism isn't the same flavor as yours.
There's a whole bunch of people, particularly the Green Party boosters, that need people like Zoran and Plattner to lose because if they are successful in moving the ball forward at all, they've been wasting their time for a decade.
JR and Philly, Candace pushed this grift as far as she could, and I imagine was starting to lose her core audience, white women with worms in their brains.
It's going to be crazy to see. This fallout's going to last into next year.
Yeah. Nayub Bekele says, this is why Alex Jones will always be the GOAT. He would never back down like this.
That's not true. He did with Trump.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Sandy Hook, and there's a compilation of him folding.
There's a reason we don't talk about him anymore. It's because he's a big sellout.
He diversified his content a little more than she has for the past few weeks, though. She's been really hammering the Charlie Kirk stuff for a while. I think she could do maybe an episode or two about Bigfoot, and that would really like just help keep people like fresh, like a little palate cleanser.
He's still doing content. Like I feel like people should be talking a little bit more about how he is in such deep debt and yet is still producing media. And
that's why he's doing it.
And right, but how are you able to keep an operation going like that? And can you be trusted? And you're like, what kind of conspiracy theories is he putting out there if he's that financially captured? I don't know. No one thinks this is interesting at all?
No, I 100%.
No, you're 100% right.
All right, thank you. Validate me. Okay. Save that for my therapist. Future Reactionary. Can I just say, I just read that one. Galactic Nurse Books. This is the funnest fun half in a while. Kudos to the MR men for knowing what women really want, aka not this. Catlek, Jesus Christ, Brett Weinstein is the most insufferable fake intellectual morons I've ever had the displeasure of being aware of. Goddamn, dude, just shut the fuck up and count your money. Amy Goodman's Cutman says, isn't Brett's very existence proof that evolutionary biology ideas are bunk? Colt Dog. They should make a dating simulator. I don't play a lot of games, so I don't know if they already have one. Maybe not. Preston from Boulder. They are so close. The problems they're talking about are caused by capitalism. Yep. Epstein files in your stocking. New Politico story. The Democratic National Committee is refusing to release its autopsy of the party's major 2024 losses and then is announcing on Wednesday breaking Chair Ken Markin's public pledge to do so.
Turn the page.
Yeah. Maybe because it's not about what Matt Iglesias says, which is that they were too pro-trans. Maybe it's about income and wealth inequality.
You don't want to hear it.
It couldn't be.
Couldn't be.
Could it?
Well, and the genocide in Gaza. Yeah. It could. Yeah, you sound like Candace Owens. Couldn't be, but could it?
I wouldn't have backed down.
I know. You've got that
But
dog.
Erica Kirk is scary. Erica Kirk is scary though. I'll give her that. She's
with those husky eyes.
She's intimidating.
Have you seen the meme of her looking? She looks like Chucky, the Bride of Chucky.
I couldn't notice anything else but like how much jewelry she had on her hands. Like,
yeah,
I
we
thought,
talked
like,
about that for sure.
Hey, don't judge that.
wild.
It has their kids' names on it or something.
Okay, well, yeah.
Yeah, we were saying she looked like Tom Brady. She had like 9 giant rings on.
Just like Rick James. I was like,
all right, 5 more. Science is political. I'm embarrassed as a biologist who studies microbiology and immunology that this guy can make any appeal to authority claim as a scientist.
And I'm right about the psych part, right? You can IM in later.
Anonymous. North Texas is one of the few places in the United States that suffers from brownouts. That is a partial collapse of the grid due to over-demand during peak air conditioning season in the summer. Texas is the #1 energy-producing state in the country, but their grid is built for profit. Absolutely. We saw that in the failure of the grid with those cold fronts.
During the cold, where they blamed it on windmills freezing, it was natural gas. I think natural gas infrastructure. February 2021, power outages killed 200 people.
Yep. Make fun, have fun again. Said the Daily Show made a compilation comparing today's Venezuelan war rhetoric to that from the Iraq War days. We really are going to do the same thing all over again. History isn't rhyming; it's repeating itself for verbatim. Science is political. Says Matt, you are right.
Thank you.
And the final IM of the day. Emma's okay says legit wondering if Candace is just surrendered a chunk of her base to Nick Fuentes for this. I hate the simultaneous race of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, and I'm scared to see what happened next with no one in power seeking to earnestly quell it either. Well said. All right, guys. Appreciate you all. Binder, thinking of you and the fam. Thanks so much, Brandon, Matt, and Brian. We will see you tomorrow, but Merry Christmas, Brandon. Won't see
Merry Christmas to you too. You
Yeah.
can say it
See you in the
now.
new year.
What'd you say?
You can
Oh,
say
I
it
say
now.
it now. Yes, thank God.
You can't afford it, but you can say it.
The first Jewish president tells me that I can say it according to Mark Levin.
I love when he said, and Miriam Allison said, it's the first Jewish president. Like, it's true.
No, it was Levin that said it, not
Oh, it was
Ad.
Levin, right.
Yeah. But anyway, appreciate you all. We'll see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light's shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101